Welcome back, magical beings, to Grimoire Audiobooks. The journey continues with part 3 of Make a Wish by Rorschach's Blot, and the stakes have never been higher. With Harry's wish continuing to unfold, we're left wondering, what happens when you gamble with magic and fate itself? In today's chapter, we dive deeper into the consequences, and trust me, things are getting more intense. Disclaimer. Before we begin, just a quick disclaimer. This fanfiction is a transformative work based on J.K. Rowling's Harry Potter series. All original characters, settings, and trademarks belong to their respective owners. This reading is created purely for entertainment, with no copyright infringement intended. So far, Harry's wish has thrown the magical world into disarray, and things are starting to get out of hand. In part 3, we'll see how the consequences of one momentary desire can lead to unexpected dangers. Make a Wish by Rorschach's Blot takes a dark, thought-provoking look at the consequences of tampering with fate, showing us a side of magic we haven't seen before. As the story progresses, the real cost of Harry's wish is starting to show, and it's more than just personal, it's world-shaking. The Harry Potter franchise is expanding, and with the recent announcements of a Harry Potter series coming to HBO Max, we're seeing a resurgence of fanfictions like Make a Wish that explore the darker, more complex elements of the wizarding world. These types of stories allow us to see familiar characters and magical elements through a new, often thought-provoking lens. Rorschach's Blot is known for weaving gripping narratives with an eye for the hidden complexities of characters. Their works challenge readers to think critically about the choices we make, especially when it comes to magic, power, and consequence. Make a Wish continues this trend, exploring how even the smallest decisions can have far-reaching effects. It's a story that keeps you on the edge of your seat, pondering what might come next. So sit back, relax, and let's dive into part 3 of Make a Wish by Rorschach's Blot. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you never miss the next magical installment. Make a Wish by Rorschach's Blot. 21. Dumbledore's obsessed with pornography. Harry woke late and took a deep breath the next morning. Just as he was about to let himself slip back into his dream, his eyes shot open. Because of his actions, it was likely that there were 2 Order members on their way to Hungary, worse 2 Order members that were familiar with Harry Potter. Cursing, Harry rushed around the room, throwing his few possessions into his pack, frantically hoping to be ready and on the road before either of his friends could find him. Shouldering his pack, Harry cautiously peeked out the door to ensure that the hall was clear before walking down to the front desk. "May I help you?" The desk clerk smiled at Harry's approach. Checking out, Harry fought to keep his voice even. "Finished my business sooner than I expected, so there really isn't any point in staying much longer." "I understand, sir." The desk clerk nodded. "The cost of your stay has already been taken care of, so if you'll just sign here." "Thank you, sir." "Have a pleasant trip." "I will." Harry nodded. "Goodbye." Harry forced himself not to run as he returned to the magical shop where he had purchased the port key to the dragon breeding grounds. "Hello again," the woman behind the counter smiled. "Need another port key to visit the dragons?" "This time I need a port key out of the country if you can swing it," Harry smiled. "And I'm in a bit of a hurry, I'm afraid." "I'm afraid that I can't get you an international port key," the woman frowned. "But I can get you to my uncle's shop in Hallis. I know he can arrange something." "Thank you." Harry started to relax. "How soon can you get me to Hallis?" "Right now." The woman flipped the sign on her shop to closed. "I was planning to visit him when you showed up. Unless you'd rather not share a port key?" "A shared port key is fine." Harry smiled. "Thank you." "Not a problem," the woman returned his smile. "Just touch the rope, and we're going in 3, 2... Welcome." An older man greeted them on their arrival. "I didn't expect to see you for a few days yet. I guess you were able to wrap things up faster than I expected." "You'd guess right." The woman smiled. "He needs an international port key to Crimea." "Excellent." The old man nodded. "I can get one that will take you to my cousin's shop in Yalta. It won't take but a few hours for me to make the arrangements. Thank you, Harry nodded. And sorry to interrupt your visit with your niece. My fault for not expecting you here sooner, the old man shrugged. While you're waiting, feel free to look over what I have for sale or you could visit the Lace Museum, the old man smiled. It really is something you have to do if you're visiting Hallis. How far is it from her? Just down the street, the old man waved to the door. You can't miss it. Sounds nice, Harry nodded. I think I'll do that. And be sure to pick up some lace while you're here, the old man called out as Harry retreated. It may be expensive, but it's well worth the price. Good afternoon. A woman greeted Harry upon his entrance to the Lace Museum. Is this the Lace Museum? Harry asked with a shy smile. Yes, it is, the woman nodded. You might wish to come back at another time. There is currently a school field trip wandering around the museum, so… It's fine, Harry shrugged. I don't have the time to come back, anyway. Then have a pleasant visit. Thank you, Harry nodded. I will. Harry spent a few minutes wandering around the museum and was examining one of the exhibits when a young girl walked up. If you look close, you can see the fish. What? Harry turned to look at the young girl. I said that if you look closely, you can see the fish. The young girl smiled. 3 superimposed fish is the symbol of Hallis, and if you look close, you can find them around the border. My Najapapi taught me that. Thank you. Harry smiled. I'm Black. What's your name? I'm Agnesh Nemet. The girl smiled. Do you see the fish? Not yet. Harry squinted. Ah, there they are. Thank you. Don't mention it. The girl smiled. Can you see the fish on this one? Well, Black says that he's on his way out of the country. Maricine Varga Catalan replied with a neutral look. He told the hotel desk clerk that his business has been completed. I see. The other figure nodded. Did he fix the problem we were having with the dragons? He cast several diagnostic charms and looked at them under mage sight. Catelyn replied, Nothing has been solved, but we have called in 2 outside experts that he recommended. Is there any indication that he didn't know that we were having problems? Any indication that his visit was a coincidence? I talked to the people that watched the dragons, Catelyn smiled. They tell me that he had with him a rather large collection of books about the Hungarian horntail, many of which are so rare that the caretakers have never even heard of them. Not the sort of thing that a person just happens to have with them. I see. The other figure paused. Do we have any idea how he knew that we needed help? We have one theory. Mr. Black was seen talking to Bela Kapuz's granddaughter. Catelyn smiled. He may be retired, but… That doesn't mean that he's out of the game. The other figure laughed. I suppose those old-timers do stick together. Have you looked for a connection? There were several people that helped us during the 1956 revolution, Catelyn smiled. And many of them don't have a name to go with them. Black could be any one of them. I see. The other figure nodded. Keep looking, and tell me if you find anything. I will, sir. Catelyn nodded. How close do you want us to watch the outsiders that Black recommended? They're here already? The figure considered the question for a moment. Don't be obvious about it. They are here by our invitation after all. As you say, Catelyn agreed. Great tubby air. Hagrid greeted the Hungarian dragon keepers a bit too enthusiastically. Now where's the dragons? Right through there, sir. The dragon keeper smiled nervously. Be careful, they're dangerous. I'm sure they wouldn't hurt a fly. Hagrid disagreed as he walked towards the cute, cuddly dragons. Can you tell me why the 2 of us were contacted? Charlie asked after Hagrid had gone. You were recommended by Mr. Black. The dragon keeper smiled. He told me that he couldn't do much. Then he wrote out 40 pages of notes and observations and told me that he was going to contact you and Mr. Hagrid. I see. Charlie frowned. Is it possible for me to speak with Mr. Black? I'd like to get his input on a few things if I could. I'm afraid not. The dragon keeper shrugged. I spoke to his hotel, and they informed me that he had left the country. Pity, Charlie shrugged. The order would have to wait. Could you show me those notes? Right here, sir. The man pulled out a thick stack of paper. Mr. Black was kind enough to provide an English translation so that you would have a reference. How thoughtful of him. Charlie took the papers. Let's get to work. Hellos. Harry returned to the store. Is anyone here? Just a moment, the shopkeeper replied. The portkey isn't ready yet, but it will be in a few moments. Feel free to browse the store while you wait. Okay, Harry chuckled silently. These shopkeepers were always trying to get him to buy souvenirs. Did you find anything? The shopkeeper walked to the counter with a smile. A few things. Harry placed a few items on the counter. I like these glass things. Hand-cut Gouda, lead crystal. The shopkeeper nodded. Very good choice. I've also set aside some magical lace if you'd like. I already bought quite a bit of non-magical lace, but why not? Harry shrugged. Add it to the rest of my things. I also have your portkey ready. The man bagged Harry's purchases. Have a good trip. Thank you. Harry paid for his purchases. I only wish that I could have stayed longer. Come back and visit us again someday. The shopkeeper smiled. And get a chance to look at what you missed. I'm not sure that I'll live that long. Harry smiled sadly and disappeared. Hello, an older man greeted Harry upon his appearance. How are you today? Very good. Harry yawned. Can I arrange an internal portkey here? Yes, the man nodded. Where would you like to go? Half a league, half a league, half a league onward. Harry smiled. All in the Valley of Death Road the 600, the old shopkeeper nodded. The charge of the Light Brigade. Harry shrugged. Tennyson. I'll have it ready as soon as I can. The shopkeeper nodded. If you're here to see the Valley of Death, then I might have something you'd be interested in. What's that? Harry's eyebrows shot up in interest. There was a rather old soldier that served in the campaign. The shopkeeper pulled out a long wrapped bundle from under the table. Story goes that he was a squib from one of the less tolerant families, and he left home and bought a commission. He distinguished himself in his first campaign, and his father heard that the son that had only brought shame to the family name was now bringing glory. Glory in the Muggle worlds. Harry asked mildly. Glory killing Muggles. The old shopkeeper shrugged. He wasn't a very nice person, but he did have his moments. He decided that if his son was going to do the family proud by killing Muggles, then the family was going to help. He went to the finest makers and commissioned a sword. Then he charmed it with all the knowledge of his family. What could it do? It had several effects. Most of them were fairly standard. Increased damage, ever sharpness, and in certain circumstances it would emit a faint green glow. The old shopkeeper smiled. Its most interesting feature, though, was the fact that it could change into a scythe. Why did they charm it to do that? Harry frowned. And how did it get its power? I doubt that they would bother to waste enough energy on a squib to keep it going forever. It would drain ambient energy to keep itself going. The shopkeeper shuddered. Very dark magic. Plants would wither, and animals would get nervous when it was out of its sheath. Let me look at it, Harry requested. All right. The old man unwrapped the sword. Don't see that it could cause much harm if we put it back quickly. Harry pulled out the sword and spent several minutes checking the blade and its charms under mage sight. Finally, he resheathed it and glanced down at the name on the handle. How much? Harry's voice came in a whisper. Seeing as how it belongs to your family, the old man grinned. I don't think I should charge. What happened to the soldier? Major Black. The shopkeeper shrugged. No one knows. He disappeared, might have been killed, might have resigned, and might have been taken prisoner. No one knows. All that was ever found was his sword. When will you have the port key ready? Shouldn't be too long. The shopkeeper smiled. Where do you want it to take you after your visit? Romania. Harry was still a bit shaken. Close to the dragon sanctuary. For a bit more I can put in another destination if you'd like. The old man gave a wide grin. Transylvania after that. Harry tore his eyes off his new sword. Will that be a problem? Not at all. The old man shook his head. One piece of advice, though. What? When you're traveling in Transylvania, be sure to be armed. Won't hurt to have that new sword of yours on your hip. The old man waved in the direction of Harry's new blade. Sometimes being visibly armed is enough to solve the problem. Other times, it helps to have things hidden. Don't matter what you chose to do. Just don't be without a weapon in Transylvania. Why? Harry frowned. Should I avoid going? One thing having visible arms does is it shows that you have the money to buy them, shows that you're too important to be a food source. The shopkeeper shrugged. Transylvania is a good place to visit. But it's also not a safe place to visit if you have any magical blood. So, I should skip it then? Harry sighed in disappointment. Ah, well, one more place I'll never see. I never said that. The shopkeeper shook his head. I said that it was dangerous. So long as you're careful, then I don't see any reason to skip it. Read that guidebook of yours and talk to the locals. I will. Harry nodded. How long until the port key is ready? Right now. The old man handed over a small steel ball on a chain. Once you're tired of seeing the Valley of Death, say 2. When you're tired of that, say 3. And when you're tired of that, buy a new port key. Thank you. Harry nodded. How much do I owe you? And when it's set to go off? Nothing, and right now. The shopkeeper grinned at his customer's shocked expression as he disappeared. It was only right to give him a bit of a break knowing what he was about to face. Those notes that Charlie brought in? Moody glanced down at the stack of paper. I looked over them. Looks like they've got some sort of pattern. Could it be chance? Albus asked with a thoughtful smile, or your constant vigilance getting the best of you? The chances of it being natural are slim to none. Moody gave the notes another look. I'd like to take some time to look over them. Very well, Dumbledore nodded. Then, unless someone has something else to add, I call this meeting of the Order of the Phoenix to an end. We'll meet again in 12 hours to discuss how our assignments went. 12 hours later. Well, Albus, I did it. Moody yawned. After 8 hours, I finally managed to figure out the message that Mr. Black encoded in his notes. Can't say I have any idea what it means, though. What are they? Albus asked with a smile. Just a few numbers, Moody shrugged. 36-23-33. Now, why would Black have taken the time to code the measurements to this month's Playwizard centerfold? Dumbledore mused aloud. The order froze and several members began pinching themselves nervously to check if they were in the land of dreams. Albus? McGonagall? Dumbledore chuckled nervously. They have good articles? Like the one on barbecuing in last month's issue. Tonks nodded. That was a good one. Barbecuing? Dumbledore asked dumbly. The Order members shifted their frozen stare to the young Auror. Like he said, Tonks shrugged. It has good articles. Also helps me shift into different body types to see them without any clothes. Good practice. Moving back to the subject, the headmaster smiled nervously. Does anyone have any idea why Mr. Black would put that in the notes? Maybe he thinks Charlie should get out more. Tonks shrugged. Who knows? He's playing with us, Moody frowned. Wanted to see if we would take the time to go over what he left. I concur, Dumbledore nodded. It looks like Mr. Black is pulling some sort of prank on us. 22. The Valley of Death. Well, the outside experts that Black called in figured out the problem, Catelyn replied. Vitamin deficiency coupled with a mild disease, the draconic equivalent of scurvy, while contracting the common cold. Either one by itself would have been simple to treat. Together, they were far more serious. Have they fixed it? We're in the process of solving the problem, but there have been some delays. What delays? Well, Catelyn sighed. They want to use the services of a potions master of their choice. The keepers refuse to let the man anywhere near the dragons. Don't we have our own potions masters? The other figures seemed amused. Why not use one of them? None of them speak English fluently enough to feel confident that they won't make a mistake. Maricine Varga Catelyn shrugged. They seem to speak it well enough to me, but I guess that when you're dealing with medicines, you don't want to take chances. Didn't Black offer the services of one of his pupils? Yes, he did, she nodded. But she's a bit unstable. She was refused her master's certificate because she was considered too impulsive. That's the public reason, the other figure shrugged. Have you found out the private reason? I would suspect that it's because she likes to read Muggle science books, Catelyn smirked. And the fact that she likes to create things that blend Muggle technology and magic. I see, the other figure nodded. A Muggle born facing a panel of purebloods. No, sir, she shook her head. A pureblood facing a mixed panel, mostly half-bloods, some mixed bloods, and 3 purebloods, who all wanted to prove their social positions by being even snottier than they had to be. The dark figure nodded. There is no snobbery worse than nouvelle rich snobbery. As you say, Catelyn shrugged. How do you want us to deal with this situation? Use Black's potions mistress, the dark figure replied. If she's good enough for him, then I suspect that she's the best. Have our masters watch her work and, if necessary, have her make something more difficult to show her skill. I want to repay both her and Black, and it strikes me that helping her get her long-withheld master's papers is a good start. Yes, sir, Catelyn nodded. I'll make the arrangements immediately. Harry appeared on the top of a hill and gazed into the valley. For a moment he saw the place as it had been, and for a moment he saw the men of the Light Brigade charging into the Russian guns. The charge of the Light Brigade, the charge of the Heavy Brigade, and the thin red line of heroes. Harry spoke in a whisper. They talked about you when I was younger. It was the only time I can remember them being harsh with debtors. He said something bad about you, and my uncle threatened to give me half of the Little Whale's desert. Didn't happen, of course, but even he respected your sacrifice. Harry drew his sword and saluted. I wish I had you helping me. I wish I had men even half as brave as you behind me when I fought in the cemetery. I'll try to be as brave as you. I promise that I'll honor your memory by facing my end with the same courage you met yours with. Harry shuddered as his vision of the past became a bit too vivid, and maybe after things end, maybe people will be able to talk about it the same way they talk about this. Maybe I'll stop being the boy who lived or the boy who died. Maybe I'll just be Harry, the man who faced his end like a trooper of the 13th. Harry sheathed his sword. It would be nice to have people respect me for something I actually did for a change, even if I'm not around to enjoy it. I suppose that you have to die. It's better to die on your feet, like a man, than to run and try to avoid my fate. Harry shrugged. Not like running would do me any good anyway. 2. Harry arrived in front of a large open iron gate. Peering inside cautiously, he was startled by a greeting. "Hello, come right in." "Hello." Harry took a cautious step through the gate. "Who are you?" "I'm Spencer Cummings," the man replied cheerfully. "Welcome to the Romanian Dragon Sanctuary." "Thank you." Harry stepped in. "Has Charlie gotten back from Hungary yet?" "Not yet." The man shook his head. "But I can take a message if you like." "No thanks." Harry allowed himself to relax. "I was just wondering if they had solved the problem yet." "Not to the best of my knowledge," Spencer shrugged. "But I'm sure that they'll have it wrapped up in no time. Sign the guest book and I'll give you the tour." "This is my first year at the sanctuary and I haven't given any tours before, so you'll be my first." "All right." Harry agreed, signing the book. "Let's go." The two of them spent several minutes walking through the sanctuary, and Spencer was obviously enjoying his time as a guide. "That over there is the dragon that Harry Potter faced in the third task of the Triwizard Tournament." Spencer pointed to the indicated dragon with a smile on his face. "Feel a bit sorry for the beast. Having to go against the boy who lived, there was no way it could win. Didn't believe the rumors that he was a glory hound or a dangerous lunatic, huh?" Harry fought to keep the annoyance off his face. "Course not." Spencer shook his head. "Besides, Charlie knows him and says that he's a very modest boy. He won't hear of anyone speaking out against him, and neither will I." "That's rather refreshing," Harry muttered. "What about that dragon? Why does he look so depressed?" "Well..." The indicated dragons had shot up, and it began running towards Harry and Spencer. "Run." "Wait." Harry stood perfectly still. Running from a large predator is never a good idea. Spencer ignored the advice and took off as fast as his legs could carry him. The dragon stopped just before it was about to trample Harry and lowered its snout to get a good whiff of his hair. "Norbert?" Harry reached up to pet the dragon's snout. "You've grown. It's good to see you again." The dragon gave a contented sigh and laid down, allowing itself to be petted. "I take it that Hagrid hasn't visited for a while." Harry scratched the dragon under the chin. "And I guess that you've been lonely." Norbert gave another contented purr. "I'll tell Charlie to have Hagrid visit you." Harry promised. Might be a good idea to have him leave something with a bit of a scent too. Harry had to spend about 2 hours petting and playing with the lonely dragon before it was willing to let him out of its sight. "Don't worry, Norbert. I'll see what I can do to make sure you get visited more often." You're alive?" Spencer's eyes were the size of basketball hoops when he saw Harry's return. "I was just calling in reinforcements to go recover your body." "Well..." Harry's reply was cut off by the arrival of a dozen heavily armed men. "Where's this tourist we gotta recover?" A woman with several visible burns and scars asked with a frown. "And what were you doing giving a tour without supervision?" "I'm right here," Harry spoke up. "So you don't have to bother going out after me?" "Thought I'm off yourself?" The woman nodded. "Not many people can fight a dragon without backup." "I didn't fight him." Harry shook his head. "I hid from him then?" one of the men asked. "Sensible, much more intelligent than most. Too afraid of being called a coward." "I didn't hide from him." Harry shook his head again. "I Must have distracted I'm somehow and made your escape? Another of the men nodded. Another good strategy. I played with him. Harry was tired of being interrupted. And petted him. He wasn't trying to hurt me, he was lonely. Lonelies? The tough-looking woman asked incredulously. Yes, lonely, Harry confirmed. Tell Charlie to get Hagrid to visit his baby more often. Norbert is lonely, and he just wants to play. 3. Tired of talking to such rude people, Harry activated his port key and left. Played Widbim. One of the tough-looking men shook his head in wonder. We gotta give this guy a job. He'd fit right in. What's his name, Spence? I'm not sure. The man smiled nervously. Let me check my guest book. Check it then. The woman nodded. Any man brave enough to stand up to a charging dragon and nuts enough to pet and play with it has a place on my team. It says here his name is, oh dear. Let me see that. One of the men grabbed the book. Says that his name is Mr. Black. I thought he was a myth. The woman shook her head, something that the quibbler dreamed up to sell more papers. He's real. One of the men confirmed, got a brother-in-law in law enforcement. From the way he talks, the quibbler doesn't even tell you half of what the guy does. No wonder he wasn't worried about the dragon. Spencer's voice was filled with awe. Even if he couldn't have charmed it, it didn't pose any danger to him. I'm back. Charlie entered. What did I miss? Quite a bit. The scarred woman looked at Charlie with a shell-shocked expression. Who's your friend? This is Hagrid. Charlie introduced the giant man. I was hoping to. Mr. Black says that Hagrid needs to visit his baby more often. The woman interrupted. He's getting lonely. I knew it. Enormous tears threatened to leak from the corners of Hagrid's eyes. Where is he? Where's my little Norbert? Spencer will take you to go see him. The woman's expression didn't change. And I'm going to go get drunk, very drunk. I'm coming too. One of the men agreed. Me too. Another agreed. After what saw Tade, I don't think, ever gonna be sober again. Won't someone please tell me what's going on? Charlie demanded. Congratulations, Hench Girl. The chief of Hungary's Potions Mastery Board smiled. We have found that your work more than entitles you to recognition as a full master. I'm honored. Hench Girl wiped a tear from the corner of her eye. Thank you. Before you go, another member of the panel stopped her. Would you mind telling us why you're called Hench Girl? Because I'm the professor's hench. Hench Girl shrugged. I know that henchman or henchman is more traditional, but I'm a girl. Yes, well, you won't have to be a hench anymore. The man replied with a smile. You're a full master now. No. Hench Girl shook her head. I'll still be a hench. Why? One of the female members of the board looked to be working herself into a rage. Is it because you're a woman? No. Hench Girl shook her head. It's because I lost the coin toss. Coin toss. The woman replied dumbly. Yes. Hench Girl frowned. I picked heads, and the professor picked tails and won. It's not fair. He looks more like a proper hench than I do, as short as he is. Granted, he doesn't have a hump, but I'm sure that we could think of something. How did losing a coin toss make you a hench? The woman had an odd look on her face. Well, Hench Girl replied, there can only be one professor or doctor, and they usually have a loyal hench. We both wanted to be the professor, so I proposed a coin toss. He won. Shutta picked rock, paper, scissors. He always picks rock. Yes, well. Congratulations, Hench Girl, the professor interrupted with his loud entrance. I knew you could do it. See, Hench Girl pointed. I told you he fits the part better than I can. Yes, well. Let's be off, the professor smiled. We have to get back to our laboratory. I want to pick up a few things first. Hench Girl disagreed. Laboratory. Shopping. Laboratory. Shopping. Laboratory. Shopping. Laboratory. Shopping. Laboratory. Shopping. Laboratory. Shopping. Laboratory. Shop. Rock, paper, scissors. Deal, the professor nodded. Good old rock. Nothing beats rock. Huh. Hench Girl cried in triumph. Paper covers rock, I win. That makes no sense, the professor whined. Why doesn't rock grind paper into nothingness? I don't make the rules, Hench Girl shrugged. But you will follow them. Fine, the professor pouted. By all, Hench Girl waved cheerfully. Thanks for the mastery. 3 days later. I figured out what the message meant. Moody shook his head in disgust. Took me 3 days, but I figured out what it meant. Now I want to know how he knew that Albus read Play Wizard enough that he was able to recognize the measurements so fast. I told you I like the articles. Dumbledore protested. I only recognized the measurements because... Albus's obsession with pornography is not the issue here. McGonagall interrupted before the headmaster could think of an excuse. What did you figure out, Mad Eye? I had Tonks do some checking, Moody leered. Well, Tonks smiled. I pretended to be interested in writing an article on how to cook the best tams to get in. Some snooping revealed that the current centerfold had been arrested by the Americans for being a polygist Death Eater. Black gave us all the info we needed. Moody gave an annoyed frown that scared half the room. And we thought that he was pulling some sort of prank. Master, Wormtail shuddered. I have some bad news and some humorous news. What's the humorous news? The Dark Lord hissed. Our spy at the Ministry tells us that Dumbledore is obsessed with pornography. He. The Dark Lord gave his first non-evil laugh in years. And the bad news? Mr. Black knew about our plot with the Play Wizard centerfold. Wormtail shuddered. And warned the Order. Wormtail, the Dark Lord said calmly. Crucio, the Quibbler, by Ms. E. A series of unfortunate events. That is the best way to describe the fates of several groups of Death Eaters that were dispatched to Austria by the Dark Lord to kill Mr. Black. We found the first group on some train tracks, editor's note, like the Hogwarts Express, and they weren't in very good shape. Reported a senior anonymous source in magical law enforcement. Looked like Black was still a bit angry about what happened in Germany. See a recap of the bloodbath in Germany on page A2. This was the first, but by no means the last group of Death Eaters found killed in a horribly brutal way. Perhaps the most famous of Mr. Black's victims were the infamous Lestranges. Had to clean them up with a mop. Our source in the coroner's office went on to add, I don't know what they did to annoy him. But after seeing what he did to them, I would suggest suicide to anyone that angers Mr. Black. Mr. Black can speak to dragons? By someone other than Luna Lovegood. Mr. Black stunned the world yesterday with the first recorded taming of a dragon. The dragon named Norbert is living in the Romanian dragon sanctuary. Handlers say that he is much more docile than most dragons. An anonymous source in the sanctuary tells us that Mr. Black was able to communicate with the dragon and determine that its unhappiness was caused by loneliness. As regular readers will know, Mr. Black has in the past shown that he is a talented cryptozoologist. His accomplishments include being instrumental in curing what is now being called the Hungarian dragon blight, the discovery of the crumple. 23. The Black Baron. The sun was starting to set as Harry arrived. Looking around, he realized that he was in some sort of clearing in a dark, forbidding forest, and he immediately pulled out his guidebook to get an idea of what he should expect. Transylvania is a wonderful country with a rich history. Transylvania is also filled with a large assortment of mystical creatures that regard humans as a good source of protein. What follows is a partial list of dangerous creatures and how to kill them. Editor's note: most things will die if you chop off their head. When in doubt, try that. Vampires. Weaknesses include sunlight, wooden stakes to the heart. Harry spent several minutes going over the list and only finished when he no longer had any light to read by. Remembering the shopkeeper's warning, Harry secured the sword to his hip and went digging through his pack for his whip and Pugio. "Let's see if I can get this thing to work," Harry muttered as he uncoiled the whip. "Hopefully without injuring myself too badly." Mental note: get some healing potions. Giving the whip a few experimental cracks, Harry was pleased to learn that the whip seemed to move according to his will. Sending the tip over his shoulder, Harry frowned as the whip seemed to get caught on a branch or something. Giving it one good tug, he managed to get it free and returned it to his belt. "Practice," he muttered to himself. "I need more practice." Shaking his head, Harry began walking towards the distant lights that he hoped indicated some sort of town or inn. Behind him, two vampires were frozen in shock. Only seconds ago, they had watched as the stranger's whip wrapped around their leader's neck and decapitated what they had thought was an extraordinary powerful vampire. "Back up," whispered one. "Not even then," replied the other. "Let someone else have this one." "I think you're right." The first was still staring at the spot the stranger had been standing on. He didn't even bother to look back, he just killed. Not many people can do something like that. "I never liked Vlad anyway," the second shrugged. "What kind of vampire picks such a stereotypical name?" "And it's not like the stranger was after us," the second agreed. "He let us go. Most humans with that kind of skill would have killed the both of us for even thinking about jumping him. Should we warn Volos?" "Let him die," the vampire laughed. "Never liked him either." After a few minutes of walking, Harry came to the door of what looked like an inn. Shifting his clothing from backpacker to something a bit less noticeable, Harry entered the building. Every eye turned to watch Harry as he entered the room. "Is there a place I can get a room around here?" Harry asked the bartender with a smile. "Upstairs," the woman nodded. "If you want a room with a lock and a sturdy door, that's extra. If you want a room with a lock on the outside the door, that's extra. If you want clean sheets, that's extra." Harry nodded. "One with a lock on the inside and a sturdy door." "Fine," the woman nodded. "Would you like something to eat?" "What do you have?" "We have soup and lamb." The woman looked up. If you want blood, then I suggest you ask Volos to share his with you. He doesn't like it if I give out his private stock without his permission." "Lamb and soup will be fine." Harry nodded as he dropped a few silver coins on the bar. "I'll eat it down here." "Sit wherever you like." The woman turned her back. "I'll have your food out in a bit." "Thank you." Harry took a seat that allowed him to keep his back to the wall and a view of the door. His quiet vacation was getting to be more exciting than he could stand. "Here," the woman dropped a large tray on Harry's table. "I included a beer. Don't ever let it be said that I didn't give a man a good meal when the time came." "When the time came?" Harry looked up from his book with a raised eyebrow. "Volos heard you were in town," the woman replied in a flat tone. "And since I doubt that you have a way out of here, I'm sorry, but it's better he take you than someone we know. I didn't tell him, and I don't know who did, but I'm sorry." "Don't worry about it." Harry sighed and carefully closed his book. "All I wanted was a quiet vacation, and for some reason, I never get a moment's peace. Send him over when he comes in." "You don't have to worry about that," the woman gave a cynical smile. "I may not like it, but there is no way I would go against Volos and his gang." Harry carefully propped his book up and continued reading while he ate. "Good meal," Harry complimented to the bartender as she cleared his plates. "Could I get another beer, MS?" "You can have another beer," the woman nodded. "And at no charge. As for the name, it's easier if I don't get too close to you." "I'm sorry. Try to see it from my side. I'm sorry." "Think nothing of it," Harry shrugged. "We can talk more about it later. When do you think Volos will be arriving?" "Shouldn't be long." The woman glanced at the door nervously. "I doubt that you'll even have a chance to finish your beer." "Then you had better hurry and bring it to me," Harry smiled. "Wouldn't want to miss drinking any more of it than I had to." The woman returned with Harry's beer and Harry returned to his book. Harry was halfway through his beer when the room became still. Looking up, Harry saw 3 pale men standing in the door. After pausing for a moment to speak with the bartender, the 3 men headed straight to Harry's table. "You must be Volos." Harry forced himself not to show any of the nervousness that he was feeling. "It's a pleasure to finally meet you. You're in my town." Volos gave a cruel smile. "That means that you have to pay a tax, and there's only one thing you have that I want. I've been doing a bit of reading while I waited for you." Harry ignored the vampire's speech and smiled. "I read that vampires were vulnerable to sunlight. Seems that there is something about the sun's rays that causes them to burn up. Is that true? Or was my book mistaken?" "It's true." Volos was confused. They were usually begging for their life at this point. "Pity that you don't have any sunlight with you, isn't it?" Harry smiled and hit all 3 vampires with a tanning charm. "Then I guess that this will have to do." The vampires screamed as their flesh began to burn. Volos made a mad lunge across Harry's table and was able to make it half across before collapsing in agony. Harry's face showed no signs of the horror he was feeling as he examined the 3 writhing vampires. "I expected it to do more than that. Oh well, looks like I'll have to finish this the old-fashioned way." And as the book said, few things can survive without their heads. The bar patrons watched in shock as the stranger drew a curved sword and decapitated the 3 vampires. "Could I have the key to my room now?" Harry asked calmly as he sheathed his sword. "It's been a long day, and I'd really like to get some rest." "No key." The dumbfounded woman could only stare at the remains of the 3 vampires that had previously claimed ownership of the town. "There's a bar you can put across the door. First one on the left." "Thank you." Harry suppressed another shudder as he walked up the stairs. Seeing the 3 vampires burn had brought up unpleasant memories of his first year and the fate of his defense against the dark arts professor. "And sorry about the mess. Did you see that?" One of the men at the bar spoke after Harry had left. "Did you see what he did to them?" "I saw." The woman nodded. "Just think of what he could do to you if he decides to be insulted by the fact that you told Volos about him." "It was him, or one of us," the man protested. "Volos wasn't going to live forever on the donations we provided him. Sooner or later, he was going to take another one of us. Just hope that he feels the same way." The bartender nodded towards the stairs. "Because I don't like thinking about what will happen if he doesn't." "Did anyone else feel it when he pulled out that sword?" An older man that had been sitting near Harry's table asked with a look of fear. "That coldness, the feeling of dread?" "What is he?" Another man asked with a frown. "I doubt that he's a vampire, because we all saw him eat." "But he can't be human, can he?" "Not after the way he killed Volos, treated a 200-year-old vampire like he is a child." "It seems that there's a new hunter in the area, sir." "What happened?" demanded a figure cloaked in shadow. "Vlad is dead, so is Volos and his men," the flunky replied calmly. "Explain to me why I should care about the fates of a few parasites." The dark figure questioned. "Ones that I myself have been meaning to destroy." "Vlad's men say that he killed Vlad the same way a normal human would sweat a bug." The flunky smiled. "And a terrified townsman tells me that it took the hunter less than 3 seconds to kill Volos and his group." "I see." The shadowed figure nodded. "You were right to bring this to my attention. We're sure that he wasn't brought in by the townsfolk. My source is terrified because he's the one that informed Volos about the stranger's presence. The flunky smiled, and I see it as a good sign that he allowed Vlad's men to live. So do I. The shadowed figure nodded. It looks as if he's not here to cause trouble. Find out his name, and send him an invitation to dine with me. At once, sir. I meant it when I said invitation, Igor. The shadowed figure continued. I don't want to antagonize an unknown power by being impolite. As you say, sir. Igor nodded. I'll tell the men not to anger him or be impolite. A meeting between equals. The darkened figure nodded. It's been so long since I've been able to have one of those. Harry awoke late the next morning and walked down to the bar. Good morning, sir. The bartender greeted him upon his appearance. Did you have a good sleep? Yes, I did, thank you. Harry gave a tired blink. Is it too early for breakfast? What would you like, sirs? The woman smiled nervously. We have soup or, if you'd like something else, I can get it. Soup is fine. Harry nodded. Thank you. We all wanted you to know how sorry we are about what happened with Volos. The woman eyed the sword on Harry's hip. And I wanted you to know that the man who did it has left town. Don't worry about it. Harry grinned. Why don't we both forget that last night happened? If that's your wish, sir. The bartender agreed. Who am I to think otherwise? Thank you. Harry gave a short laugh. Now about that soup. Right away, sir. Harry leaned back in his chair and smiled. The people were so friendly around here that he might be persuaded to stay longer than he had intended. And that thing with the vampires last night? He was sure that it was just an isolated incident, not something likely to happen again. Will there be anything else, sirs? The woman smiled nervously as she delivered the food. Some fresh bread, perhaps? I'm fine, thank you. Harry smiled. Is there anything to do in this town? Nothing much, sir. The woman's hands were trembling. It's fairly isolated. I'm sure I'll find something. Harry grinned. Thank you. Yes, sir. The woman backed up a few steps and then rushed into the back room. Must have a lot to do this morning. Harry shrugged at his hostess's exit. Harry finished his soup and decided to explore the town. It quickly became obvious that there wasn't much to see. The town held a blacksmith shop, an inn, a general store, and another unmarked shop. Shrugging, Harry walked into the general store. If all else failed, he could always get some souvenirs for his friends. Hello, Harry called out as he entered the store. Is anyone here? I'm right here. An old woman's head popped out from behind the counter. Just one moment. I'm just going to take a look around, Harry replied. I'll be at the counter in a few minutes. Take your time. Harry spent several minutes walking around the store. Why do you have so much black silk? Vlad liked it. The old woman replied. He liked the whole Prince of the Night look. I thought they said his name was Volos? He wasn't so into continuing stereotypes as Vlad was. The old woman shook her head. He may have been a monster, but I don't know what I'm going to do with all that silk now that Vlad's gone. I'll take it, Harry sighed. I'm sure I know someone that can use it. Bless you. The old woman gave a toothless smile. You've saved my store. Always happy to help. Harry gave a weak grin. I'll take some of those hard candies behind the counter also. Here you go, Sonny. The old woman pulled out a handful. On the house. Harry paid for his purchases and walked to the next door. Hello, son. What can I do for you? I was just looking around, Harry replied. Is it possible to get a portkey here? Why do you ask? The shopkeeper asked wearily. This shop sells other magical items, Harry shrugged. I was hoping that you would have portkeys too, or at least know where I can get them. I'm afraid that I don't have those. The old man shook his head sadly. I do have some other things that you might be interested in, though. What? Harry sighed. Let me show you. The old man pulled a small trunk out from under the counter. A complete hunter's kit. Never been used. What's a complete hunter's kit? Harry's eyebrows were touching. Everything a hunter of the supernatural could possibly need when traveling through the area. The old man smiled. Silver weapons, wooden stakes, a portable potions library, lockpicks, and many more things. It also comes with a comprehensive research library. Fine. Harry nodded. And since you've decided to buy the complete hunter's kit, the old man smiled. Allow me to suggest a few more items that you'll need if you're traveling through the area. I thought you said the hunter's kit had everything I would need. Harry smirked. That's what the advertisement says. The old man agreed. But you don't seem like the kind of man that would trust your life to a bunch of marketers. Okay, what else? Harry sighed again. Some more books. The old man piled the tomes on top of the trunk. And a lot more potions ingredients, including several that are only found in this area. The old man rummaged around in the back. I would also suggest that you purchase these potions. What are they? Blood replenishing potions. The old man shrugged. You'd be surprised how many I sell. Fine. Harry nodded. Anything else? One more thing. The old man pulled out a worn leather-bound book. This book is filled with useful spells and curses. You might not need it for dealing with supernatural threats, but it will certainly aid you in dealing with normal wizards. Thank you. Harry nodded. Anything else? No. The old man shook his head. Nothing else. Then I'm going to take this back to my room and go through it. Harry hefted his load. It's a good thing my pack is bottomless. That it is, lad. The old man chuckled. That it is. Harry walked back to his room and spent the remainder of the day reading through his new books and cataloging his new items. Finally getting everything situated the way he wanted it, Harry pulled out his new spell book and started to read. A muffled knock broke Harry's concentration and caused him to look towards the door. What is it? I have an invitation for you, sir. The bartender's voice called through the door. One moment. Harry got up and opened the door. What's this about an invitation? The Count has asked you to dine with him and has offered you a room for the night. The woman smiled nervously. He wished you to know that he has nothing but respect for you and hopes that you will accept. How do I get there? Harry asked calmly. He has also sent his carriage. The bartender replied, with the instructions that they will wait until doomsday for your answer. Who is this Count? Harry wanted all the facts before he decided what to do. He's the vampire that controls most of the region. The woman's hands started to tremble. But he's not so bad as Volos was. I don't think he wants to fight, sir. Why? Because he's being much more polite than he would be if he wanted to fight you. The bartender did not want to be alone with this man for any more time than she had to. Tell the Counts me. Harry paused. Tell them that I would be happy to accept the Count's kind invitation, and that I shall be down in a few minutes. Yes, sir. The woman sagged in relief. I'll tell them. Harry closed the door and spent a few moments ensuring that everything was in its proper place. Shouldering his pack, Harry walked down the steps. Are you the Count's guest, sirs? A man in red and black livery asked politely. Yes. Harry nodded. I am. Why didn't you give me the invitation yourself? I didn't want to seem rude, sir. The man kept his tone of respect. Confronting you in your own room could have been seen as aggressive by some. I see. Harry nodded. How long will it take us to get to my meeting with the Count? It shouldn't take too long, sir. The man replied as he opened the inn's door for Harry. A few hours at most, depending on the weather. Thank you. Harry nodded as he stepped into the carriage. One more thing, sir. The guard paused before closing the door. May I have your name? Black. Harry sat back in the plush cushions. My name is Mr. Black. Thank you, sir. If only Hermione could see me now, Harry muttered to himself as he pulled out another book to read on the trip. She'd be thrilled that I'm reading so much. Harry soon lost himself in the book, and in what seemed like no time at all, he felt the carriage pulling to a stop. We're here, sir. The driver called down respectfully. I've taken the liberty of having the staff announce your arrival. Thank you. Harry got out of the carriage and stretched. Where's this meeting? Right this way, sir. Harry followed the man into the main entrance hall where they were greeted by a distinguished-looking man in black and red silk. It's a pleasure to finally meet you, Mr. Black. The Count dipped his head in respect. I am the Count. It's a pleasure to meet you as well. Harry saw no reason to be impolite. Though I do wonder why you wish to meet with me. Come this way. The Count led him to a small dining room. Normally, I would have used the larger dining room, but I'm told that you're not the kind of man that will be insulted if I don't use a table that will seat 100. No, Harry chuckled. I'm not. Have a seat. The Count motioned towards a chair. What would you like to eat? Anything is fine. Harry sat. Thank you for the hospitality. And thank you for allowing me to extend it. The Count smiled. The cook gets so few chances to show off his talent. Then I'm glad to give him the opportunity. Harry smiled. Allow us to get down to business, Mr. Black. The Count took a sip from his wine glass. I would like to start out by thanking you for removing Vlad and Volos. They have been problems for quite some time now. It wasn't a problem. Harry took a sip from his own glass. Though I am curious why you're so happy to see them gone. One of my hobbies is making wine. The Count smiled. Including the glass you're drinking right now. Every year the vines will produce grapes. I don't harvest the grapes by cutting the vines because that would spoil next year's crop. We do not need to kill humans to get our blood. The glass I'm drinking came from the cook yesterday, and it's just as good as it would be fresh. Vlad and Volos did not understand that. They did not understand that the peasants outnumber us by at least 100 to 1, and that we exist only as long as we aren't too much of a burden. I see. They were a danger to all of us. The Count smiled. It is no longer the old days when vampires could do as they pleased. It is a new era that demands new methods. Why didn't you take care of them yourself? Harry asked mildly. There is unfortunately one of me and many small problems, the Count shrugged. And taking a personal interest would have been seen as a sign of weakness by those that are unhappy with the new rules. I'm glad I could have been some help in solving your problem, Harry nodded. Would you be willing to help with another problem, Mr. Black? The Count smiled. I would be willing to reward you handsomely. What problem? Harry held up a hand. I'm only agreeing to hear you out. That's all I ask, the Count nodded. I have a werewolf problem. Someone in one of the villages not far from here has been infected, and I need them to be found and eliminated. I'm not going to kill someone just because they turn into a wolf during the full moon. Harry's voice was flat. One of my best friends is a werewolf. Good, the Count smiled. Because I don't want you to kill them for being a werewolf. I want you to kill them for the murder of several of their neighbors. What happened? I provide every one of my towns with a jail, the Count shrugged. This serves more as a place to safely have one's change than anything else. Most of the inns are also equipped with safe rooms as well as several of the houses. This wolf has not chosen to use any of them. What's worse is that there have been a few cases where it locked itself in a house with innocent people. No, Mr. Black, I do not have anything against werewolves, but I do take my responsibility to protect my subjects very seriously. Why not give them wolfsbane potion? Harry asked. It may not cure the transformation, but it does make it less dangerous. Wolfsbane. The Count leaned back in his chair. I'm unaware of any potion by that name. It doesn't cure them, but it does make the transformation a bit easier, and it keeps them from being affected by the dementia. And you know where I could get this potion? The Count seemed delighted by the prospect. I have a friend that I suspect can brew it. Harry nodded. If she can't, then I have a few more people I can contact. Wonderful. The Count gave a satisfied nod. And something I will be delighted to provide. But not. I fear something that will help me with my current problem. I'm not sure what I can do, Harry exhaled. But I'm willing to go to this town and look around. Thank you, Mr. Black. The Count sagged in relief. I am eternally grateful for your assistance in this matter. There is a full moon tonight. If we hurry, we can have you in position before the beast starts its hunt. How am I going to get to this village? I'll have a portkey made. The Count nodded. Is there anything you requires? Nothing I can think of. Harry shook his head. Thank you for the offer. The Count left the room and returned a few moments later with a small bottle and 2 links of chain. I would suggest that you coat your weapons with this before you start. The Count handed over the small bottle. It will magically coat them with silver. The chain is the portkey. Just say wolf, and it will activate. Say Count, and it will return you to this castle. Good luck, my friend. Thank you. Harry spent a few moments coating his weapons, then took a deep breath. Wolf. Harry appeared in the town square next to a small fountain. Taking a seat on the side of the fountain, he looked around, not afraid of the wolf. A man with long matted gray hair and yellowed fingernails rasped out. You should be. Why? Harry turned just in time to watch the man change. Damn. The wolf lunged for Harry's throat, and he just managed to get his arm up in time to save his life. Screaming in pain, Harry frantically grabbed for his wand. The wolf made an odd keening whimper and its grip began to loosen. Harry rolled so that he was on top of his attacker and his head closed around the handle of his Pugio. Savagely stabbing the beast, Harry did not let up until it regained its human form. Collapsing, Harry mustered the last of his strength. See. Count. Mr. Black. The Count rushed over to help his friend. You're injured. Only thing I could think of doing was shoving my arm in his mouth. Harry coughed. Kept his jaw busy, so he couldn't bite me anywhere else. Yes, I'm afraid that he may have crushed the bones. The Count cradled his friend's head. You've been bitten by a werewolf. That's not so bad. I can always have a friend make me wolfsbane. Harry managed a weak grin. You were right. He was a monster. He walked up to me and started to talk and smiled before his change. I won't let you turn into a wolf, Mr. Black. The Count made a small cut on his wrist and let the blood drip down into Harry's mouth. Forgive me for what I am about to do. Harry's body began burning and he arched his back. Darkness began clouding his vision and everything went black. You're awake, eh? A young female voice cried out joyfully. I have to go awake the Count. Murgle, Harry replied. I'm happy to see that you're well, my friend. The Count walked into the room. I seem to recall you giving me some blood. Harry forced his voice to stay level. Am I a vampire? No. The Count took a seat. When I gave you blood, one of 3 things was supposed to happen. 1, you would become werewolf. 2, my power would overcome that of the wolves, and you would have become a vampire. And 3, you had a very small chance of remaining human. So I'm human? No, the Count smiled. And you're not a werewolf either, you're something else. Something else? Your senses are a bit higher than a normal human's would be. Your strength, and especially your stamina, have also gone up. The Count gave a confused shrug. You'll not transform. I've already checked and found that you have no adverse reaction to silver or sunlight. To be quite frank, I have no idea how this could have happened. Anything else? Harry's heartbeat returned to normal. You may be fond of having your meat rare if you were not before. The Count shrugged. I don't know, I would suspect that if you ever wished to become an animagus, then your form would be that of a wolf. Or perhaps you would also have the form of a wolf. You, my friend, are something entirely new and unique. Great, Harry muttered sarcastically. Just frigging wonderful. I am sorry, the Count frowned. And if there is any way I can make amends, don't worry about it. Harry waved it off. The past is in the past. Did you learn anything about the wolf? Yes, the Count nodded. His name was Fenrir Greyback, a Death Eater that was also known as the werewolf who kills for fun, and I dearly wish that I knew what he was doing here. Probably trying to recruit more Death Eaters, Harry guessed. I can't think of any other reason. Neither can I, the Count shrugged. What time is it? It's nearly noon, the Count replied. Why, Because I had better get to my next destination. Harry sat up. Do you know where I can get a port key to Bulgaria? I'll make you one myself, the Count offered. Are you sure that you don't need more rest? Positive, Harry nodded. Being sick in bed is no way I want to spend my vacation. The Count handed back a small silver badge. This is your port key to Bulgaria. It is also a permanent port key back to my castle and a badge to show your status as this region's premier law enforcement officer. Thank you. Harry accepted the badge. How do I activate it? To return, tap it 3 times with the tip of your wand or say the phrase, I wish to see my friend the Count. And to go to Bulgaria? Harry asked. Before I tell you that, may I ask you to do me one more favor? What? Harry's face became expressionless. Would you be willing to put me in contact with a potion maker that can make wolfsbane? Of course, Harry nodded. Flew the professor and asked for Hench Girl. Thank you, my friend, the Count smiled. To go, just say the word Vila. Goodbye. Harry gathered his things. Vila. Goodbye, my friend. The Count walked towards the fireplace and threw in a handful of flour. Professor. Yes. Girls had appeared in the flames. What can I do for you? Are you Hench Girls? The Count asked politely. Yes. Hench Girl nodded. What do you need? Can you brew wolfsbane potion? And if you can, would you be willing to sell me large amounts of it? It's very expensive. Hench Girl frowned. But I can do it. Money means nothing. The Count waved off her objection. Are you sure you want me doing it? Hench Girl asked nervously. I am a master, but Baron Black said you were the best in Europe. The Count nodded. So, of course, you'll charge 10% more than usual. Baron Black. Hench Girl's eyes widened as she registered the rest of the sentence. 10%. 20% then. The Count nodded. You drive a hard bargain. Okay. Hench Girl nodded. When do you need it and how much do you need? I will need monthly doses for 30 individuals. The Count smiled. I will also need to know where I can deposit Baron Black's revenues. Revenues? Hench Girl looked puzzled. Yes, the Count nodded. It was the perfect thing to do with Vlad and Volo's lands and possessions. He left before he could tell me where the gold from his lands and business were to be deposited. I'll speak to the professor. Hench Girl nodded. I think he knows which bank Mr. Black uses. I am eternally in your debt. The Count bowed. Now, if you will excuse me, matters of the state demand my attention. 24. Vila can be friendly. Hello, Mad Eye. Remus nodded to the older man. Any reason you came early? Had something to tell you. The old or nodded. And I wasn't sure if you'd want others around when I did. What is it? Remus paled. Is it about Harry's? No. Moody shook his head. It's about the man who bit you. What do you need to know about him? Remus frowned. I don't know much. I was just a kid when it happened. I don't need to know anything about him. Moody gave a terrifying smile. He's dead. What? How? Looks like he was out recruiting, Moody shrugged. And he had the misfortune to run across Mr. Black. How did he die? Remus asked with morbid curiosity. Not sure, Moody shrugged. I'm told that he was poisoned and stabbed, but my sources aren't the best in that part of the world, so I could be wrong. But you're sure he's dead? I'm sure, Moody nodded. Of that I'm positive. Thank you. Remus closed his eyes. It's good to know that he can't hurt anyone else. Figured it might be, Moody nodded. Goodbye, Remus. Harry arrived in an empty town square and looked around. Most of the businesses seemed to be closed, but one of the shops appeared to be open. Figuring that the shopkeeper would know of a suitable place to get a room, Harry walked in. A bell rang as Harry opened the door, and from the back of the shop he heard a faint, "Just a moment." "Okay," Harry replied. "Now then," the shopkeeper smiled. "What can I do for you, Mr. Black?" Harry smiled. "I was hoping that you would know of a hotel or some other place that I can get a room." You came a bit later than I expected, the man shrugged. But you've still got time, have a seat, it won't be long. Thank you. Harry sat down, glad that the shopkeeper was arranging a place for him to stay. How long do you? The bell on the front door rang, interrupting Harry's question and admitting several cloaked figures. Right on time, the shopkeeper smiled. I have your supplies ready. Do you want to pay now or have me send you a bill? Send us a bill, a young female voice answered. I'm surprised that you're not alone. They usually try to avoid us. He's not from around here, the old man replied. Not a bad fellow, though. Oh. The woman turned to look at the seated Harry. You look familiar. I have that kind of face. Harry gave a nervous smile. He's Gabrielle's savior, another female voice spoke up. I recognize him from her pictures. He looks a bit older now than he was then. Why are you here, Harry? The lead woman gave an unseen smile. You can see through my disguise, Huz? Harry sighed. I came because I was curious about the place that Victor came from. That silly field is nothing to one that possesses our talents. The woman nodded. Where are you staying? I'm not sure, Harry shrugged. The shopkeeper was going to find me a place to stay. Then you must stay with us. The woman settled the matter. It is the least we can do for Gabrielle's famous savior. I wouldn't want to be a burden, Harry smiled. How do you know Gabrielle's? It is no burden. I insist that you stay with us. Gabrielle is our cousin. The woman took his hand, and our cousins would never forgive us if we let you go off and stay in a dirty inn when you could have stayed with us. All right, Harry nodded. I wouldn't want to cause you any trouble. Harry stayed with his new friends for several days until finally, after a long goodbye, Harry managed to leave their hospitality and get on with his vacation. Staggering into town, Harry walked into the nearest open businesses and walked painfully to the bar. Afternoon, the bartender greeted. Something I can do for you? Yes, Harry's jaws were clenched in pain. I'm going to need to speak with a healer of some sort. I'm a healer, the man at the end of the bar spoke up. What can I do for you? I think I might have broken something in my waist, Harry replied in a hiss. And I feel a bit sick to my stomach. One moment, the healer waved his wand and frowned in concentration. You're right about the pain in your waist. It looks like you have several hairline cracks in your pelvis. Oh, Harry groaned. What about the fact that I feel sick? Dehydration, the healer replied. Drink these 2 potions and you'll be fine. Thank you. Harry downed the potions. Now does anybody know where I can arrange transportation to Sofia? Right here, the bartender spoke up. The bar doubles as the travel agency, few other things too. How much? 20 levs. The bartender pulled out a glass marble. Do you need anything else? No, Harry replied, accepting the marble. 1 SEC. Thank you. The bartender smiled, accepting payment. Have a good journey. Thank you. Harry managed a weak smile just before the portkey pulled him away. Wasn't it the guy that went off with that group of Vila a few days ago? One of the random bar patrons asked quietly. Eyes widened as the men considered the question, and the bar was shrouded in silence until the bartender licked his lips and asked, what were his injuries? As I said, the healer spoke to the spellbound group, his voice filled with awe. A cracked pelvis and a severe case of dehydration. How do you suppose that happened? The bartender asked quietly. Lots of ways, for example, the healer's eyes widened. It couldn't be. You don't mean? The bartender blinked. He can't be human. Did anyone get his name? The healer asked excitedly. Black, an old man spoke up from the back of the room. When he visited my shop, he told me his name was Black. The bar patrons were frozen in shock, eyes widened even further. Well, the bartenders moistened his lips. I suppose it makes sense. If anyone could survive a pack of Vila, it would have to be the mysterious Mr. Black. Good afternoon, sir. A uniformed man greeted Harry upon his arrival. Is this your final destination? No. Harry was still feeling a bit tired and sore from his time with Avila. I'm going on to Moscow. If you like, I can arrange that, sir. That would be fine, Harry nodded. How much? 50 levs, the man smiled. Fine. Harry paid for the portkey. How long until it activates? Just say Moscow, and you will be on your way. Thank you. Harry gave a weak smile. Moscow. Harry did not enjoy the trip to Moscow, and he made a silent vow to learn some other means of transportation besides portkeys and flow. Purpose of your visit? A plain-faced woman in a drab uniform asked in a bored tone. Meeting a friend. Harry yawned. Your name? Black. Harry yawned again. First name? Mr. Harry smiled. You may pass through. Thank you. Harry popped his neck as he walked through the entry gate. Behind him, the woman calmly put up a next window sign and left to inform her supervisor. Harry pulled his Zippo out of his pocket and found a quiet place to have a conversation. Professor? Harry called into the small flame. Are you there? I'm here, Mr. Black. The professor smiled. Thanks to your generosity in promoting Hench Girl's potion-making talents, we will be able to meet you sooner than we had hoped. Great, Harry smiled. How soon? Sometime after dark local time, the professor smiled. We could get there earlier, but we felt it prudent to go slowly on the shakedown cruise. Whatever you want, Harry nodded. I was planning on spending a bit more time here, but if you're early, then I guess I'll have more time to visit a few other places. Excellent, the professor nodded. If I might make a small suggestion. What's that? Harry smiled. Why don't you travel with Hench Girl and I? The professor gave a wide grin. We were planning to take the next month or two to go on a prolonged expedition to test the Zeppelin. Where are you planning to go? Harry shrugged. Egypt. The professor gave a wide grin. After that, wherever you wish to go. Hench Girl and I have no preferences. Sounds good, Harry nodded. I'll spend the day looking around town and meet up with you tonight. See you then. The professor gave one last grin before clicking his lighter closed. Now how am I going to spend the day? Harry muttered to himself. Shrugging his shoulders, Harry walked out the front doors to hail a taxi. Where to? The cab driver asked in a disinterested tone. Show me around the city, Harry smiled. I want to see anything you might think would interest me. You can pay and tip very well, Harry smirked. I don't have much time in the city, and I want to enjoy it. If you can pay, the man nodded. Harry and his driver spent several hours touring the city. Harry saw things that he couldn't have imagined seeing in his childhood and delighted in the city's atmosphere. Thank you. Harry leaned back in his seat. There is just one more place that I'd like to visit. Then I'd like to find a good bar. Where? I want to see the yellow building in Lubyanka, Harry smirked. No problem, it's not so far. The driver nodded. After that I know of a very good bar, very classy. Thank you, Harry smiled. Tell me when we're there. We're there, the driver nodded. As I said, very close. Look to the left. Wow. Harry shook his head. Seeing it on the television did not do the old building justice. I never expected to see it like this. It doesn't seem the same without the statue in front of it. It's a bit strange. The driver agreed. The bar now? Yes, Harry nodded. I have a bit of time to kill, and I can't think of a better way to kill it. It will be a few minutes until we arrive, the driver offered. Relax. The driver stopped the cab in front of an unremarkable building. It doesn't look like much, but inside it is very fancy. Thank you. Harry pulled out his wallet. Do you have any currency that you'd like to be paid in? US dollars, the driver smirked. If possible, if not. No problem. Harry handed over a few $20 bills. Thank you. Tell them that Danya brought you. The driver shrugged. They give me a finder's fee for bringing you. All right, Harry nodded. Goodbye. The driver rolled up his window and sped off. Harry walked through the building's double doors and was stopped by an elegantly dressed man in a dark suit. Can I help you? Danya told me that this was a good place to get a drink. Harry smiled. Name? Mr. Black. I see. The man in the dark suit nodded. He's been waiting for you. Table in the back corner. Okay. Harry approached the back table cautiously. Have a seat. The old man at the table nodded. I've been expecting you. Why? Harry took a quick look around the room. Because I know the merchants and they sometimes tell me things, the old man shrugged. So sit and enjoy yourself. Thank you. Harry sat. Misters? Winter. The old man gave a cold smile. Have some vodka. I had them bring out a bottle of Postelskaya, and I don't want to drink it myself. I'd also like to get something to eat if I can. Harry accepted the glass. I'll have them bring something out. The old man downed his glass and poured another. Thank you. Harry downed his glass. Why did you want to see me? To give you this. The old man handed over a worn leather-bound book. Weather magic. Works best during the winter, but it can be used every day of the year. Thank you. Harry accepted the book. I owed them a favor. The old man shrugged. Thank you all the same. Harry smiled. Enjoy your night. The old man stood up. I'm afraid that I must be going. Goodbye. Harry raised his glass in salute. And have a pleasant evening. I shall. The old man nodded. And thank you, Mr. Black. Hellos. Laodice Lovegood, publisher and editor of the Quibbler, appeared in front of a large bronze faceless statue. Hello, a man greeted him. Who might you be? My name is Lovegood. I'm a reporter. Oh, okay. I was hoping to ask some questions about a man named Mr. Black. The odd man smiled. Perhaps you've heard of him. That's him. The local indicated the statue. Local legend says that if you pat the statue's right foot, then you'll be lucky with women, and if you pat its left foot, then you'll get a healthy child. Really? Laodice looked up at the statue in astonishment. How long have they said that? About a day now. The local shrugged. Tradition has to start somewhere. I couldn't agree more. Laodice nodded. Why did it start? Well, the local sat down. Few days ago, Mr. Black came to town, and then left town with a pack of villas soon afterwards. That is impressive. Laodice nodded. I'm not finished. The local smirked. He came back a few days later, had a bruised pelvis, and he looked like he had been doing some sort of strenuous activity. That's to be expected. Laodice shrugged. So what? 6 hours later, 3 villas came into town. The local's smile widened. They were so tired that their normal charm wasn't so strong, and one of them mentioned that the others were still asleep. I see. Lovegood's eyes widened. Yep, the local nodded. That's why we put up the statue. Any man who can wear out a dozen villas deserves to have his own statue. Mr. Black and the Dozen Villa, by Laodice Lovegood. There exists a town in one of Bulgaria's more remote regions that has 2 unusual features. The first is the fact that it is located near a large concentration of villa. The second is that it boasts a large statue of Mr. Black. Locals believe that this statue grants special powers over matters of love. Mr. Black returned to town to greet a group of shocked townsfolk. It was only after the exhausted villas shared their story that the true nature of the events was realized. Sir, Black has met up with a small man and is leaving the country. Did he do anything of interest while he was here? We're not sure, sir. He shrugged. He lost the men assigned to follow him. We do know that he visited headquarters. Do you know what he was doing there? No, sir. The man shook his head. We don't. Then tell me something you do know. He told the customs agent that he was meeting a friend. The man began. He was later seen drinking with the general. I see. Sir? The general has always been a patriot, but not in the usual sense. He will protect the country from invasion from outside, but He has always refused to pick a side in the internal conflicts. 25. Doctor Who? Harry awoke and was for a moment disoriented. Looking around his strange surroundings, it took him a moment to remember stumbling out of the bar with the professor the night before. Must have found me a hotel room. Harry shrugged as he pulled back the curtains to look out the window. Or not. Harry watched in shock as a passenger jet flew by. Where the hell am I now? Quickly getting dressed, Harry walked out of the room and into the hallway. Hello, Hench Girl greeted him cheerfully. Would you like some breakfast or something to cure a hangover? Breakfast, please, Harry nodded. And I don't have a hangover this morning. Okay, Hench Girl smiled cheerfully. What would you like? Anything is fine, Harry smiled. Or I can cook if it would be too much trouble. You can cook? Hench Girl smiled. Where did you learn? I didn't have the best childhood, Harry shrugged. But one of the good things to come of it is my skill in cooking. Okay, Hench Girl shrugged. Here you go. Wow. Harry picked up a fork and began to eat. That was fast. Cooking is like making potions, Hench Girl smiled. After a while you start to learn tricks to make it go easier. It also helps that I'm a witch, and I can use magic to make things go faster. I suppose that makes sense, Harry nodded. You wouldn't have any books of domestic charms to help with cooking, would you? Not with me, no. Hench Girl shook her head. But I'll try to find some. Don't bother, Harry smiled. I'll be able to find something when we touch down. Okay. Hench Girl's cheerful attitude returned. You haven't seen my watch, have you? Harry rubbed his wrist. I couldn't find it when I woke up. Well, Hench Girl bit her lower lip. Maybe you should talk to the professor about that. I'll ask him then. Harry stood. Do you need any help with the dishes? In response, Hench Girl waved her wand and caused them to disappear. Nope. Okay, Harry chuckled. I'll go talk to the professor then. Bye. Harry walked down the hall and through the door that Hench Girl had indicated. Have you seen my watch? Harry blinked the sleep out of his eyes. I could have sworn that I put it on the bedside table. What? The professor looked up. All right. It's in that box, and that box over there, and some of it's on the table behind you. What? Harry stared in shock at the tiny parts. Why did you take my watch apart? Hench Girl, and I wanted to see how it worked. The professor shook his head. And right off the bat we saw several places that could be improved upon. They said that it was indestructible when I bought it. Harry stared at the small parts in shock. They said that it could survive anything. Yes, the professor nodded. Hench Girl is on the floor having a word with them about false advertising. What am I supposed to use now? Harry's shock overrode his anger. Hench Girl, and I built you a new watch. The professor held up a watch that bore a strong resemblance to his old watch. Thanks. Harry tried it on. How soon till we get to Egypt? Few hours. The professor shrugged. Why? I'm worried that I won't have enough time to do any of the other things that I wanted to do on my vacation. You've got plenty of time. The professor smiled, pointing to Harry's new watch. Why? Harry had to suppress the sudden urge to leap out the nearest open window. Because I added in a few features to give you extra time, the professor smiled. Pull out the knob on the side and time stops. Twist it clockwise and time will go forward at an accelerated rate. Why would I want it to go forward? Harry hated to ask, but he knew that the question would torment him if he didn't. It gets you through boring meetings faster, the professor nodded. It's the only way I ever got through all those lawsuits. What log? Harry bit his tongue. He really didn't want to know. What I mean to say is, what other features did you build into the watch? Oh, nothing much. The professor shrugged. If you turn the knob counterclockwise, then time goes backwards. Don't you think that it's a bit dangerous to be playing with time and space? Harry asked, and don't you think that it's a bit irresponsible to be doing it to get me more vacation time? Danger adds spice to life, the professor replied. And to answer your other question, No, I don't think that it's irresponsible. If you want to hear about irresponsible, then let me tell you about the time that Hogwarts allowed one of their students to play with space-time to get more classes. Never mind. Harry smiled weakly. I withdraw my objections. I thought you might. The professor nodded. The watch has several other features, and I've taken the liberty of printing out a small booklet for you. Thank you. Harry took the booklet. Have you had a chance to complete that armor I asked for? Why, yes, the professor nodded. I just finished it. Can I see it? Harry was getting used to his odd friend's way of looking at the world. Of course, the man nodded as he pulled out a black shimmery bodysuit. It's worn under your clothes like a second skin. The main features are that it's charmed to keep a constant comfortable temperature, to keep you clean without bathing. It hardens when subjected to impact, it's puncture-proof, and it also provides quite a bit of spell protection. Wow. Harry was impressed. Anything else? A few other things, the professor nodded. For example, if you wear it, you can't be detected by most magical sweeps, and I've managed to make it self-repairing, nothing too special. Thanks. Harry took the suit. If you need me, I'll be in my cabin reading. Don't forget the user's guide for the suit. The professor tossed Harry another book. I doubt you'll be able to figure out how to put it on or take it off without it. Thanks. Harry took the other booklet and left the room. Hello. Hench Girl smiled as Harry walked out of the room. I just wanted to thank you. What for? For recommending me. Hench Girl smiled. People have never taken my potion making seriously. They've always thought that I would mess it up. No problem. Harry smiled. I know two people who are really good at making potions. One of them is a greasy git that has the maturity of an angry 2-year-old, and the other is you. That really makes me feel good about myself, Hench Girl smirked. Maybe I should have stopped at no problem, Harry chuckled. I'm glad I could have been of help. If there are any potions I can make for you, just let me know, okay? And if you need any ingredients, just come to me. Harry nodded. Or any books? Books. Hench Girl perked up. Yes, Harry nodded. I have quite a few of them. Just picked up a new one on weather magic from a strange old man last night. Can I see them? Sure, Harry nodded. I'll just give you my pack, and you can pick out what you need. Oh, thank you. Hench Girl's grin threatened to split her face. Don't mention it, Harry shrugged. That's what friends are for. Professor, Hench Girl rushed into the lab. Look at this. What is it? The small man looked up at his assistant. Can't you see that I'm in the middle of some things? A game of solitaire? Hench Girl replied sarcastically. Oh, how very important. I'm busy with matters far above your feeble comprehension, the professor replied smugly. So be gone. Fine. Hench Girl was enjoying herself. Then I guess you don't want to see these books filled with rare and interesting charms that Mr. Black lent me? What? The professor turned away from his card game. I demand that you show me. No. 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 Please? Okay. Hench Girl nodded. The best one has to be the book on weather magic. It's much more advanced than anything I've ever seen on the subject. Look at this. The professor held up another book. I can't believe he has something on this. You can't read that, can you? Hench Girl squinted at the cover. What language is that anyway? I don't know, the professor admitted. But look at the diagrams. They must be on wards of some sort. True. Hench Girl nodded. I think that this one could be improved by a change in the angle of about 3 degrees. I was going to say 2.5, the professor nodded. But you do have a point there. So, Hench Girl looked around the lab. Do we have everything we need to make a translator of some sort? I'm not sure, the professor shrugged. Why don't we see if Mr. Black would be willing to loan us his glasses? Works for me, Hench Girl nodded. Let's go. The two rushed down the hall and began frantically knocking on Harry's door. Yes? Harry blinked at his friends. What do you need? We were wondering if we could borrow your glasses? The professor smiled innocently. Why? Harry was instantly suspicious of the professor's innocent smile. We want to study the charms to see if we can replicate them. Hench Girl shrugged. We need something to translate the books you lent me. Oh, Harry nodded. I suppose so, just bring them back. We shall. The professor held out his hand. What is it? Hench Girl asked upon seeing the odd look on Harry's face. I can see. Harry looked around in shock. I'm not using my glasses, but I can still see. The professor frowned. This is more your area of expertise, Hench Girl. We'll investigate it later. Hench Girl shrugged. I doubt I could figure it out, and trying would waste valuable research time. Right you are, the professor nodded. Come, we go? Don't forget to bring my glasses back when you're done, Harry called out after them. I need them to read languages besides English. We shall, the professor called over his shoulder. Bye, Hench Girl called over hers. Thank you. Harry watched his two friends run off and shook his head in wonder. Mr. Black. Hench Girl's knocking on the door roused Harry from his nap. What is it? Harry staggered towards the door. Here are your glasses back. Hench Girl passed the item back. And we'll be Alexandria in a few minutes. Thanks. Harry accepted the glasses. Were you able to figure out the charms? Yes. Hench Girl nodded. And we charmed a large piece of glass with the same translation charm. Good. Harry yawned. What are we doing in Alexandria? We're visiting the library, Hench Girl replied. There are supposed to be some old designs of machines. How old? Harry asked curiously. Old enough that the original language on some of them is classical Greek, Hench Girl smiled. I can't wait to get a look at them. I hadn't realized. Harry smiled. Thanks for telling me. No problem. Hench Girl nodded. Thanks for lending us those books. They've been very helpful. In what ways? Harry yawned again. Well, Hench Girl took a moment to think about the question. The one that's been the most help so far is the weather magic. It helps out quite a bit in flying the Zeppelin. We can provide tailwinds, or help shield it from bad weather, or... Harry asked nervously. Or we can use it to make a cloud hide it from the Muggles. Hench Girl smiled nervously. No more reports of UFOs. We can also make it so there's a bank of fog when we arrive. UFOs. Harry bit his tongue. Why do we want a thick bank of fog when we arrive? Because it's cool. Hench Girl gave a satisfied nod. That was my idea. Oh, okay. Harry took a deep breath. Is there somewhere I should be? Or somewhere I could watch the landing? Sure. Hench Girl nodded. Follow me. Hench Girl took Harry to the bridge, and they both looked out in wonder as the city approached. Beautiful, isn't it? Hench Girl whispered. The view from so high up. Yes, Harry nodded. It is. I am worried about one thing, though. What's that? Hench Girl whispered back. The fact that the professor is steering this thing, Harry replied. Hench Girl glanced over her shoulder to watch the professor erratically spinning a large stereotypical ship's wheel. Oh, Hench Girl nodded. Don't worry about that. We set the Zeppelin on autopilot before we began our approach. Then why is he still steering? He said that there's no point in having a Zeppelin if you can't play with it and pretend that you're the captain. Hench Girl shrugged. I'm just annoyed that he's hogging it and not letting me have any fun. I see, Harry shrugged. Well, if there's no danger in all of us dying in a horrible fiery crash, then I don't see any reason to worry about it. That's the spirit, Hench Girl nodded. We've reached our destination, the professor announced. Shall we go down? We're not going to land? Harry frowned. Nope, Hench Girl smiled. We've got a new invention to try out. What new invention? Harry reminded himself that he hadn't been horribly injured by any of their new inventions in the past. It's a stationary transport system, the professor smiled. So long as the Zeppelin remains stationary, Our system can get us to and from the ground with ease. What if the Zeppelin moves? Harry asked. The wind will push it around if nothing else. I wouldn't worry about the wind. The professor waved off Harry's objection. Then what happens if someone ports in or something? Harry blinked. Couldn't they do something? We've got wards to prevent that. The professor smiled. They'll go up as soon as we leave. This may sound like a stupid question. Harry licked his lips. But is your new transport system able to go through wards? No. Hench Girl shook her head. Not these wards. Nothing can get through them. Then, Harry frowned in confusion. If the transport system can't get through wards, how do we get back to the Zeppelin? The professor and Hench Girl shared a look. I guess we don't. I see. Harry nodded. Wouldn't it be better to keep someone on the ship that can raise and lower the wards so that people can port in? I suppose. Hench Girl nodded. Nodded? Damn. The professor frowned. I expect you to come back and let me have a turn in the library soon, Hench Girl. And I'll take my turn watching the Zeppelin after that. Harry nodded. It's only fair that we share the responsibility. Okay. Hench Girl nodded. Come on, I'll show you how to get down. Okay. Harry nodded. Let's go. Hench Girl led Harry down the hallway to a small room with a large ornate silver circle inlaid on the floor. This the portkey transfer chamber. Hench Girl smiled proudly, or porttrans for short. How does it work? Harry looked down at the strange device. It's similar to a portkey. Hench Girl began to lecture. What it does, it turns a small object on your person into a short-range portkey. It then activates the portkey and sends you straight down to a safe landing area. How does it take you back up? Harry blinked. It remotely activates the portkey that took you down and causes it to bring you back up, Hench Girl replied. Some of the drawbacks are that you need a stationary landing area, no ports while the Zeppelin is moving, and the fact that the range is so limited. Interesting, Harry nodded. What does it turn into a portkey? Anything you want, Hench Girl smiled. I wouldn't be surprised if you could turn your hair into a portkey, though we haven't experimented on that. Your hairs? It's a non-living substance that you always have with you, Hench Girl shrugged. Like I said, we haven't experimented with it yet. What should I use as my portkey? Harry smiled. And how do I get it to bring me back? Do you have your Zippo on you? Hench Girl blinked, because that would be perfect. Yes, Harry nodded. I do? Good. Hench Girl nodded. We've designed the system so that the two devices work well together, and it avoids accidental activation. Okay. Harry pulled out his Zippo. How does it work? To get back, Hench Girl pulled out her own Zippo. Open the portable flow connection and say the activation phrase. What's the activation phrase? Anything you want, Hench Girl shrugged. What would you like it to be? How about? Harry grinned. Port me up? Okay. Hench Girl nodded. Why did you choose that? Tradition, Harry shrugged. Remind me to show it to you and the professor. I think you'd get a kick out of some of the ideas they had in that show. Hench Girl shrugged. Just step in the circle, and we'll be on our way. Now what? Harry looked around. Do I have to say an activation phrase? Just a second. Hench Girl spent a few moments fiddling with the controls. Don't say it until I'm in the circle. The activation phrase is, port us down, okay? Okay. Harry nodded and waited until his friend was standing next to him. Port us down. The port felt similar to a normal portkey, the only difference being that the pulling sensation was in the soles of their feet rather than behind the navel. The two of them appeared in front of a large ornate fountain in tiled courtyard. Well, Hench Girl looked around. Here we are. Where is here? Harry asked with a puzzled grin. The Library of Alexandria, Hench Girl replied. Didn't it burn down a few thousand years ago? Harry frowned as his mind brought up half-forgotten lessons from primary school. They had to hide it to keep it from being destroyed, and I guess that they haven't bothered to unhide it. Oh, Harry blinked. I guess that makes sense. Let's go. Hench Girl was bouncing up and down. I can't wait to start reading about all the ancient devices. Okay. Harry trailed behind his perky friend. 2 massive bronze doors marked the entrance to the library, and after walking past them, the 2 friends found themselves under a massive dome. Welcome to the library. An old man in a somber robe smiled in greeting. Is there anything I can help you with? Where are the engineering texts? Hench Girl's grin threatened to split her face, and the potions texts. Right through there in the eastern wing. The old man waved his hand to indicate the direction. They're clearly marked. Thank you. Hench Girl smiled. I'll meet you in the reading room, Mr. Black. Okay, Harry replied. Can I help you find anything? The old man turned to Harry. Combat spells, maybe? Harry shrugged. Anything that might be useful to know. I think I might have an idea of what you're looking for. The old man nodded. Come with me. Hello, my friend. The professor walked up to the table that Harry had been occupying. Have you found anything interesting? Few spells that might be useful. Harry nodded. And a bit of medical magic. Excellent. The professor smiled. Hench Girl mentioned that she found several ancient engineering texts. Do you happen to know where they are? I have them right here. Harry indicated a pile to his left. I figured you would want to see them, so I made sure that they didn't put them back on the shelves. Thank you. The professor gave a wide grin. Did you have a chance to peruse them? I took a quick look. Harry nodded. I didn't understand much, but it was interesting to learn how long ago they could do some of the things in the texts. Isn't it? The professor agreed. Did you have a chance to get any work done while you were on the Zeppelin? Harry smiled. Yes, I've managed to complete my latest invention. The professor held up a small device. I call it the hex quarter. Oh, okay. Harry looked at the small item that bore a vague resemblance to a silver cigarette case. What does it do? Remember how you asked Hench Girl to start work on a device that detects poison? The professor asked with a maniacal grin. Yes, Harry nodded. Well, we've done it. The professor smiled. And I've also added in several other features. It can detect wards, has several forensic charms, several diagnostic charms, a database of plants and animals, and much, much more. Wow. Harry was impressed. How do you use it? Well, the professor held up the device. You just open it and tell it what you want it to look for. I'll just have it use the poison and diagnostic charms and… What? Were you aware that your blood is one of the most poisoned substances known? The professor's eyes widened even more, and that you have both werewolf saliva and vampire blood in your system? Harry nodded. I'm not sure about the poison, but don't worry about the werewolf and vampire stuff. It's been taken care of. I see. The professor stared down at his display. Is there? Excuse me? A pretty young woman walked up and smiled at the two of them. Yes. Harry looked up. Hello, the woman smiled. I couldn't help but overhear your conversation. Could I talk to you for a second? If you like. Harry shrugged. I'm the doctor, she smiled. Who? No relation, the doctor smirked. I was wondering if I could get a look at your blood? If half the things that your friend said are true, then I think I may be able to learn enough to buy my way back into polite society.
What do you mean by that?
Harry frowned. I graduated in the top 10% at my school, the woman sighed. And I decided to become a healer. I graduated near the top of that too. So, Harry shrugged. I'm not seeing any problems yet. The problem is that I wanted to be the best healer that I could be. The woman gave a bitter laugh. So, I decided to study Muggle techniques. That was a bit harder. But I was smart, and 12 years later, I was a doctor with a couple of specializations. I'm still not seeing any problems. Harry blinked. The problem is that a pure-blood princess like me should know so much about Muggles, she frowned. No one would let me treat them because they were worried about being contaminated by the Muggle techniques. What's worse is that I couldn't even work in the Muggle world. Why not? Being a pureblood means that I don't have a background that will stand up to the kind of investigation that most hospitals in the developed world will subject their doctors to. So you're here, Harry nodded. Living off Daddy's money and doing research, the woman nodded. Hoping to find something that will let me buy my way into a job where I can practice my skills. What do you want with me? Harry decided to get to the point. Your friend said that you'd been bitten by a vampire and a werewolf. The doctor's eyes lit up. He also said that your blood was poison, and you said not to worry about that. I said not to worry about the vampire and the werewolf, Harry corrected. I'm not sure about the poison. I think that I might be able to make a medical breakthrough if you let me study your blood and body. The doctor was one step away from getting on her knees and begging. I'll do anything. How long do you need? Harry smirked. I don't have much time, and the time I have is going to be spent traveling. I'll go with you, the doctor replied. I'll pay my way. I'll do anything. All right, Harry nodded. If my companions don't have any objections, then you may accompany us, MS. Just call me doctor, the woman smiled. You've already got a professor and a hench girl. Why not let your collection grow, Mr. Black? Harry smiled. I see, the doctor giggled. Thank you for having me. 26, Tomb Raider. Excellent idea. The professor entered the conversation. Why don't you let me show the doctor to the Zeppelin and then Hench Girl, and I can set her up with a laboratory? Okay, Harry blinked in surprise. I didn't think that you were going to, if it's not too much trouble. No trouble at all, the professor smiled. Come with me, doctor. All right, the woman nodded. Though I'm surprised that you're accepting me like this. Just touch the Zippo. The professor held out the small object. And I'll activate the port key. Port keys? The woman touched the Zippo. I thought you said Zeppelin? Port me up. The two felt an odd pulling sensation in the crowns of their heads. I did. What is this place? Come with me. The professor ignored her question. Do you have any magical items with you? A few, the doctor nodded. Why? Put them in this box along with your wand. The professor gestured towards a small box. We need to make sure that they don't interfere with the charm matrix and crash the Zeppelin and kill us all. Kill us all. The doctor quickly tossed her wand and a pair of rings into the box. The professor looked down at his hex quarter. You missed something. Oh, the woman nodded as she tossed in her earrings. I almost forgot. Quite all right. The professor closed the box. Come with me. Where are we going? I'm going to introduce you to my hench girl. Hench girl. The professor replied with a grin. Hench girl? The doctor had a strange look on her face. Yes. Hench girl stuck her head out into the hall. This is the doctor. The professor smiled. She's going to study Mr. Black's blood. Why? Hench girl's nose wrinkled. It's poisonous. The professor shrugged. It also contains werewolf saliva and vampire blood. That is strange. Hench girl nodded. Do you think he'd give me a sample? I'm sure he would. The professor nodded. I'll get the contracts. Hench girl disappeared back into her room. Contracts? The doctor looked down at the professor with a confused expression. Yes, the professor nodded. In effect, they state that you are being hired to work as a researcher and that any discoveries belong to the company and will be used to buy you shares in the company. Profits. The doctor smiled. You get a large share of any profits from anything you discover, the professor nodded. Along with a share of every other discovery, it also states that you will never betray or reveal the identity or secrets of Mr. Black or any of the other employees. Identity. The doctor asked with a raised eyebrow. Your real name is not the doctor. Mine is not the professor. Hench Girl's is not Hench Girl, and I'm told that Mr. Black has a very embarrassing first name. The professor smiled. We all have our secrets. And you want to protect them? The doctor nodded. That sounds reasonable. To be honest, I'd be worried if you didn't have something like this. The professor and I have both signed something similar. Hench Girl offered as she handed over the contract. The only one that hasn't is Mr. Black. Why not? The doctor asked as she scanned the contract. 2 reasons, the professor replied. One is because he has more secrets, and if you look you'll see a clause about that. The other, he's the boss, Hench Girl shrugged. And while he may have a very relaxed way of running things, he's still the boss. Without his help, none of us would have anything to research. That sounds reasonable, the doctor nodded as she signed the contract. What now? Now I fold it up and put it into the secure document storage, Hench Girl replied. And the 2 of us get your wand and items, the professor smiled. You won't have to relinquish them again. There wasn't any danger, was there? The doctor began to laugh. You just wanted to disarm me. Mr. Black may be able to kill several groups of hostile wizards before lunch without anyone's aid, the professor shrugged. But Hench Girl and I need all the help we can get. I think I'm gonna like you too, the doctor shook her head. I didn't even think about it until I realized that the 2 of you had me boxed in. We wouldn't have forced you to sign it, the professor gave a weak smile. But we had to be sure that you weren't one of Mr. Black's enemies. I told you that I understood, the doctor smiled. Like I said, I would have been worried if you hadn't done something. Growing up with my family, let's just say that they aren't the most easy people to get along with. Left with the idea to be careful of people's motives, accepting me with open arms would have just made me paranoid. I'm sorry. The professor opened the box and handed it over to the doctor. What would you require for a good medical research laboratory? Oh, lots of things. The doctor began reviewing her mental list. The first thing I'd like is a good microscope. You wouldn't happen to know how to build one, would you? We've located Mr. Black Master. Wormtail simpered. Where is he? He's been spotted in Egypt, Master. Wormtail cowered. Take a team and destroy him, Voldemort commanded. Yes, Master. Wormtail cringed. May I have permission to ask our allies for help? You may, the Dark Lord nodded. It's time they started earning their keep. Thank you, Master. Wormtail kissed the hem of the Dark Lord's robe. Thank you. You're welcome, Wormtail. The Dark Lord smiled. Crucio. Excuse me. A man wearing a pith helmet spoke to get Harry's attention. But you wouldn't happen to be Mr. Black, would you? I am. Harry nodded. What can I do for you? I'm Director Asim. The man held out his hand. I work for the Antiquities Division. Mr. Black. Harry took the man's hand. Nice to meet you. We were hoping that you could help us with something, the director smiled. What do you need? We're having trouble locating a tomb. The director pulled out a file. Our research shows that it has to be in this area, but we've been unable to locate it. I'm still not sure how I can help you. Harry frowned. I don't have any idea how to find what you're looking for. Well, the director gave a weak smile. We were hoping that you could use your knowledge of wards to find it. I'm told that you are quite adept at using Mage Sight. Oh, Harry nodded. That I can do. I'd be happy to help. Excellent, the man nodded. Now all we have to do is work out the contract. What contract? Well, the man paused. The standard contract that we use with Gringotts states that you get 1/3 of the treasure and 1/3 of the magical knowledge. Really? Harry had heard his uncle talk about negotiations enough to know that you never took the first offer. How interesting. But I see no need to use that contract with you, the man sagged. How about equal shares? How about I get any magical knowledge discovered, Harry suggested. And access to any magical knowledge that you've previously discovered? I'll have to talk it over with my superiors, the man stalled. Would you be willing to share any knowledge you discovered? Anything that wasn't too dangerous to be known, Harry agreed. No offense, but I've had bad luck with government officials. I'll be back with an answer soon, the director promised. Okay, Harry nodded, a bit surprised that things had gone so easily. Take your time. I'll be here for another day or two before moving on. Harry spent another hour reading through his stack of books before the professor returned. Hench Girl and I spent a bit of time setting up the doctor's laboratory, the professor explained. You won't believe the kinds of instruments that she had us create. Those Muggles are quite clever, aren't they? When you don't have magic, you do other things. Harry nodded. Did anything happen while I was gone? The professor reached for another book. Some guy from the government came to ask me to look for some tomb, Harry replied. Then we negotiated for a little while. You know how it is. No, I don't. The professor put down his book and picked up another. I never learned to negotiate. Oh, Harry nodded. Well, he offered me a price that was way too low, and I countered with a price that was way too high. Then he left so that he could pretend to talk to his superiors. Is that how it works? The professor was impressed. I never realized. I'm fairly sure that's the way it works, Harry shrugged. I've never had to do much negotiating in the past.
Well,
I'm sure everything will work out in the end, the professor nodded. Hench Girl and I wanted to visit the pyramids tomorrow. Would you like to come with us? Sure, Harry nodded. Sounds like fun. I have met with Mr. Black. Asim looked around the room at his superiors. What did he say? One of the fatter men wiped his brow. He told me that his price is half the treasure, all the magical knowledge, all the magical items, and access to all of our magical knowledge. Asim replied. He added that he would be willing to share any magical knowledge with us after checking to ensure that it's not too dangerous. He can't be serious. The fat man's eyes shot open. The goblins only demand a third. The goblins can't find this tomb, one of the others gently reminded. And, according to rumor, Mr. Black may have been around when it was found. Still, the fat man protested. All the magic, he thinks he can screen through it and give us the few spells that he deems safe enough? My guess would be that he knows something about the contents of the tomb, the other man replied. Reports say that it is the resting place for a very powerful court wizard who knows what kind of dangerous it might contain. Half is better than nothing, Asim spoke up. Some knowledge is better than none at all. Mr. Black has a history of generosity. He's done more to help the European governments in the last few weeks than anyone in the past 5 centuries. Do it, the fat man nodded. Tell him that we agree to his terms for any site that he discovers. I will, sir. Director Asim nodded. Does anyone else have anything they'd like to add? Ask him if he'd be willing to help with the bandits in the desert. The director of magical law enforcement spoke up. Better yet, warn him of the bandits in the desert and let him do the rest. I'm told he likes to pretend to have no idea what's going on around him. It's only polite to play along. I will. Asim nodded. I have no doubt that I will be coming before you tomorrow to inform you of a magnificent treasure. Good evening, gentlemen. The professor woke early the next morning and promptly went back to sleep. For hours later, he got up again and walked to the bridge. We're here, Hench Girl greeted him cheerfully. And now that you're awake, you can watch the Zeppelin while we go to the pyramids. And oh, the professor disagreed. I command you to watch the Zeppelin. Okay, Hench Girl nodded cheerfully. Thanks, I thought you'd want to stay up here after, but if you don't, how dare you try to deceive me? The professor wasn't a morning person. I command you to go down to the pyramids. If that's what you want. Hench Girl managed to successfully hide her grin until she got to the port, trans chamber. Sucker. Where's the professor? Harry looked around. Isn't he coming down with us? He decided that I'd go down first, Hench Girl answered smugly. And one of us will relieve him later. Okay, Harry nodded. Is the doctor coming? She's already down, Hench Girl replied. She said she wanted to pick up a few things for her lab. Okay, Harry shrugged. Let's go. Yay. Hench Girl ran over to the pad, and the two friends ported down to see the Great Pyramids. Are you and the professor interested in the way the pyramids were built? Harry stared up at the Great Pyramid with wide eyes. To some extent, Hench Girl nodded. It's interesting to see the way things were done in the past. That it is, Harry shook his head. Shall we go in? Okay. Hench Girl nodded. Let's go. The two friends entered the pyramid and gazed in wonder at the wonder of the king's chamber and the great gallery. Moving on to the queen's chamber, the two friends discovered that they were not alone in the pyramid. Hello. Hench Girl smiled at the odd-looking man. How are you? And why are you wearing a disguise field? Harry added, fingering his wand. I'm fine, thank you. The odd man smiled at Hench Girl. Because I'm a goblin. Oh, Harry relaxed. Sorry for being so abrupt, but I have quite a large number of people trying to kill me, and I'm afraid that I get paranoid sometimes. Quite all right, the goblin nodded. Are you just here to visit? I am. Harry nodded. Hench Girl's here to get an idea of how the place was built. Really? The goblin perked up. You wouldn't happen to be the Hench Girl? The one who travels around with the professor and Mr. Black, would you? Yup. Hench Girl nodded. And this is my friend, Mr. Black. Nice to meet you. Harry nodded. I'd like to get your opinion on something if I may. The goblin handed Hench Girl a parchment covered in notations. It looks as if there may be a dead space behind this wall, but I haven't found a way to prove it, or any entrance. I see what you mean. Hench Girl looked over the notations. Maybe if we... Mr. Black, Director Asim rushed into the chamber. I'm so glad that I was able to find you. Hello, Director Asim. Harry nodded. How are you today? I'm doing well, Asim smiled. And I have some wonderful news. What's that? Harry smiled. The government has agreed to your demands, the director replied quickly. All the magical items and knowledge, and half the treasure of any find you make. What about access to what you already have? Copies are being made as we speak, the director smiled, and will be delivered after you find the tomb. Great, Harry nodded. Mr. Black, Hench Girl looked up from the parchment. Would you mind using your mage sight? Sure. Harry glanced around the room and focused on one spot. I wonder what would happen if I... One of the walls seemed to shimmer before revealing a new entrance. After stepping through, the group looked around in wonder. You found it, the goblin shouted in glee.
How remarkable.
What is it? Asim couldn't believe his eyes. Looks like a repository of basic spells. Harry glanced at the label on one of the jars. And maybe a few potions that we can decode. You can read the labels? Asim stared at the strange man in shock. Harry looked up. I'm sorry, I wasn't paying attention. One of the workers wrote something on the wall, and I was just reading that. What does it say? Asim couldn't believe what was happening. It's rather dirty, Harry blushed. I'd rather not say. Should I record this as a joint find for Mr. Black and Gringotts Bank? Asim glanced at the goblin and Harry. No, the goblin shook his head. I don't work for Gringotts anymore, I retired. You still deserve some of it, Harry protested. We wouldn't have found anything without your help. You say that you're going to look for more? The goblin gave a wide smile. Cut me in for an equal share, and we'll call it all this even. Excellent, Harry smiled. I was going to ask for you help, and this just makes things easier. Really? The goblin couldn't believe his ears. Why would you want my help? Well, Harry began. Correct me if I'm wrong, but doesn't Gringotts do a lot of exploration of old tombs? They do, the goblin nodded. And weren't you exploring this place? Harry smiled. I was, the goblin nodded again. And in doing so you show your competence, Harry finished. I'd really like to have you along if you can be half as helpful in the future. I understand, the goblin nodded. I'll be happy to help. Great, happy to have you along, mister. Just call me Architect, the goblin replied. It's the English translation of my name, and it won't hurt my ears every time you try to say it, unlike most human attempts at my real name. Are you an architect? Harry blinked. I'm trained as one, the architect nodded. And as a construction engineer, Never got to do much more than simple maintenance and a few small expansions, though. Why not? No call for it, the architect shrugged. All the infrastructure is in place. Why should we undertake major projects if there's no need for them? I just want to create one thing on my own. I see, Harry nodded. So, I retired, the architect shrugged. And I travel the world looking at great works in stone, dreaming about the day I can build my own. Well, Harry licked his lips. That's fairly similar to what my friends are doing. We travel the world looking at great engineering projects, Hench Girl chipped in. And Mr. Black travels the world complaining about how all he wants is a quiet vacation, and why do those Death Eaters keep dying in accidents that happen to take place in the same general location? I think I must have done something terrible in a past life, Harry lamented. Like destroy a couple civilizations. We all have bouts of bad luck. Hench Girl patted Harry's hand sympathetically. Come, Mr. Black. Back to the Zeppelin. You still haven't thought of a name for it, huh? Harry shook his head. Let's go, guys. Shouldn't we wait until a team gets here to secure the site? Asim couldn't believe what was happening. No need. Harry squinted at some of the hieroglyphics. Move out of the way. The group of people left the room, and Asim stared in shock as the wall closed up again. How do we get back in? Tell them the password is Fekta, Harry replied. Does anyone want to get some lunch before we go? 27. Crushed Toad. Or Shacklebolt. Fudge strode into the room followed by his toad-like special assistant. Your team is assigned to my assistant for a classified mission outside the nation's borders. Yes, sir. Shacklebolt nodded. What happens if we get captured by the government of the country that we're entering? Let me worry about the politics, Fudge snapped. Do your job, or I'll replace you. Yes, sir. Shacklebolt kept his face impassive. May I ask what the mission is, sir? We will be hunting a notorious criminal by the name of Mr. Black. Umbridge entered the conversation. He's wanted for the murder of several prominent members of British society, including Lucius Malfoy, and we are going to bring him to justice. Mr. Black. Kingsley was stunned. You expect us to go against one of the most dangerous men in the wizarding world with only 5 oars. You have your orders. Fudge turned to leave. Take hold of this portkey, or end your career at the ministry, Umbridge commanded. They say he doesn't kill law enforcement. Kingsley tried to reassure his team. We should have a good chance of getting through this in one piece. Trusting their leader's words, the Auror team took a deep breath and put their hand on the portkey. Several Egyptian officials accompanied Harry and his group as they approached the supposed location of the hidden tomb. When did you discover that tomb over there? Harry gestured towards the cliff face, or that one. Which tomb's Mr. Black? Asim frantically searched for some sign. This one. Harry patted a seemingly bare wall. I must admit that they used a rather complex ward on this one. We haven't discovered it, Asim admitted. I'll have some of the men mark it for further exploration. Great, Harry nodded. How about this one? Asim sighed. That report he was going to have to write for his bosses was going to take forever. 5 hours and 43 tombs later, Harry and his group finally arrived at the location. Here we are, Mr. Black. Asim was confident that Mr. Black would find it in no time. Do you see it? Nope. Harry shook his head. There doesn't appear to be any tomb here. Could I see your notes? Here's a copy of the original papyrus scroll along with the translation. Asim's heart dropped as he handed it over. The day was not a loss, especially after all the discoveries that Mr. Black had made. But after all that effort, not finding the original objective was disappointing. Here's your problem. Harry put his finger on the parchment. Your translator made a mistake here. This isn't the location of the tomb. It's not. Asim perked up. No. Harry shook his head. The tomb is with all the other wizard tombs, in the Valley of Magicians. The Valley of Magicians? Asim repeated dumbly. Yup, Harry nodded. So let's go there. I'm not sure where the Valley of Magicians is, Asim admitted. Oh. Harry glanced down at the parchment and then looked around. Follow me. Everything's changed in the last few thousand years, but I think I can find it. Harry led the group through several small draws and under a rock arch. The tomb you're looking for should be the third one on the left. Harry pointed. What is this place? Asim looked around in wonder at the seemingly new tombs. The Valley of the Magicians, Harry replied with a yawn. Should be about 300 tombs here. I'll draw up a map if you want. That would be very helpful, Asim replied in shock. What is this inscription? It does not appear to be regular hieroglyphs. Let me look. Harry squinted and after a moment removed his glasses. Oh, I'm not surprised that you can't read that. Why not? Because there haven't been many people in history that could read that. Harry replaced his glasses. I'll translate it if you like. It's not that important though, just talks about how great the guy in the ground is. I see. Asim's eyes couldn't have gotten wider. How did you? The sound of falling rocks in the distance and a large rising cloud of dust interrupted whatever the man was going to say next. Looks like a rock slide. Harry squinted at the dust. You'd better send some men to check it out. Someone might be hurt and it would be a crime not to check. Yes, of course. I'll head the party myself. Asim volunteered, eager to get away. 5 minutes earlier and 3 miles away. Have you found anything yet? Umbridge demanded. I can't keep up these cooling charms forever. I think we're on his trail. Shacklebolt fought the urge to frown. It shouldn't be too far ahead. Well, hurry up, the toad-like woman demanded. I don't want to be in this sun any longer than I have to. Why don't I go talk with the lead scouts? Shacklebolt suggested. Then I'll be able to give you a better report. The toad-like woman grunted her assent and continued to glare at the oars assigned to her protection detail. Kingsley's long legs took him ahead of the small procession and was soon beside his point man, or in this case, point girl. Why can't I use cooling charms? Tonks asked in a fair impression of Umbridge's voice, and why wasn't I smart enough to resign when I had the chance? You can't use cooling charms because we need to conserve our magical strength in case there's a fight, Shacklebolt answered with a forced grin. And you didn't resign because you're as dumb as a post. Hey, Tonks frowned. I'll have you know. A large rock hitting the back of her head halted the Auror in mid-sentence, and she crumbled to the ground. Tonks. Kingsley rushed over and attempted to shield his subordinate from further harm. Grunting, he felt several more rocks impact. Shacklebolt collapsed and fought hard to remain conscious. The rock shower lasted for a fraction of a second, and Kingsley had to wipe the blood from his eyes to get a good look around. Horrible screams broke the silence, and it took the Auror a moment to find their source. Umbridge lay pinned under 2 massive rocks. The toad-like woman screamed in pain and fear as she watched the blood leak from the lower half of her body. After taking a moment to check to make sure that Tonks was still alive and in no danger, Shacklebolt rushed over to check the large woman and to see if he could render any assistance. Just as he prepared to cast his best blood-clotting charm, Umbridge gave a sort of gasp and sagged to the ground. Hogwarts' first High Inquisitor was dead. How did your expedition go, Asim? Successful beyond our wildest dreams, Asim replied proudly. Black discovered a hidden chamber in the Great Pyramid. He discovered several unknown tombs on the way to the site, and he discovered an entire valley filled with the tombs of the ancient magicians. So, it was a good idea to ask for Black's help, a woman in shadow nodded. Tell me what you think of the man. Leave nothing out. He scares me, Asim admitted. He made an offhand comment about seeking redemption for destroying several civilizations in the past. He casually read a dead language, and he offered to translate an unknown language. He mentioned the fact that things had changed in the last few thousand years, and that he might have a bit of difficulty remembering where the Valley of Magicians might be, and the casual way he located tombs leads me to believe that he wasn't so much discovering them as remembering where they were located. I see, the woman nodded. I don't think you do, Asim continued. A preliminary report says that several of the wizards in the valley were killed by the Dark One, and I believe that the Dark One is the man that took me to visit all these tombs. We cannot afford to antagonize this man. And we won't, the woman promised. We shall do everything we can to remain in his good graces. Mr. Black, a group of several Egyptian law enforcement officers approached with a smile. We checked that landslide, and you were right to be concerned. We found several people trapped under the rocks. Was anyone hurt? Most had only minor injuries. The man smiled. But there was one death. Documents on the woman's body state that they were a group of British Oris that was sent to make your arrest. I see, Harry frowned. Do you know why? Something to do with the death of a prominent pureblood in Switzerland. The man shrugged. But it's none of our concern. We were hoping that you could look through these photos and identify them to confirm that they were British Oris and not imposters. The dead woman is at the bottom. Let's see. Harry began going through the photos. This one is Orr Kingsley Shacklebolt, a good man and a talented Orr. This one is named Tonks, another good Orr. She's a bit touchy about her first name, so just call her Tonks. Can't remember this one's name, or this one. Harry reached the final photo and couldn't help but smile, and her name is Dolores Jane Umbridge. I'm not too fond of her, and I can't say that I'm sorry she died in this terrible accident. What would you like us to do about the surviving Oris? The Egyptians eyed each other. Tell them that I'd appreciate it if they didn't try to arrest me. Harry smiled. Now I realize that they're just doing their jobs, but... We understand, sir. The Egyptians couldn't believe how good Black was. Would you mind making sure that they get the best medical attention possible? Harry asked, his concern evident. And charge it to me. I understand that they were just following the orders of an idiot politician, and I want to make sure that they're taken care of. Yes, sir, the men nodded. We'll ensure that they get the best of care. How are you, Orr Shacklebolt? A small woman walked in and sat next to the Oris bed. I'm from the Office of Foreign Affairs. And you want to know what my team was doing in your country without sanction? Kingsley closed his eyes. No, the woman gave a musical laugh. We already know all that. The documents in Ms. Umbridge's pockets told us all we needed to know about your mission. So, what's going to happen to my team? Kingsley felt sick to his stomach. If it helps, I'm willing to testify that they had no knowledge that they were going to invade a sovereign nation's borders. No need to do that, the woman smiled. After consulting with Mr. Black, we've managed to decide how we're going to deal with the situation. Yes. Kingsley braced himself for the worst. We're going to let you return to England with a warning, and we're going to lodge a formal protest with the British government. That's all. Shacklebolt's eyes shot open in astonishment. That's all, the woman agreed. And Mr. Black had a message for you. What did he want to tell us? He said that you were good Oris, that you and Ms. Tonks specifically were good Oris, and that he understood that you were just doing your job. He said that he'd rather you not try to arrest him in the future, that it's annoying. He insisted that you get the best medical care possible, and he also insisted that he pay for it. The woman's expression turned cold. He also said that he wasn't too fond of Ms. Umbridge. He added that he wouldn't feel any sorrow at the fact that she died in a terrible accident. I see, Kingsley paled. He liked us, and he wasn't too fond of Umbridge. We escaped from a freak accident without any injuries, and she died in horrible agony. I see you understand. The woman patted him on the arm. Feel free to come back to Egypt any time you like. Feel free to hunt Mr. Black any time you like. But if I were you, I wouldn't expect him to be so understanding in the future. I see, Kingsley nodded. Anything else you'd like to add? That will do it. The woman stood up. The healers tell me that you and your team can leave at any time. We have an international portkey waiting for you, for when you wish to advantage of it. Thank you. Shacklebolt allowed himself to relax. Don't thank me, the woman smiled. If it were up to me, you'd be in a cell right now and your team would be spilling everything they know under truth serum. But of course, I'm not the one you went after. From your quick return, Fudge didn't bother to look up as Shacklebolt entered the room to make his report. And the lack of my assistant, I'd say that your mission was a failure. Mr. Black wanted me to tell you that he might get annoyed if you keep trying to arrest him, Shacklebolt reported to the minister. And I would recommend that you honor his request. If you chose to ignore it, then I doubt that you will find any Auror willing to follow your order to arrest him. What's the worst thing he could do? Fudge blustered. Well, he could kill you, Kingsley suggested. And I'm told that he gets creative if you anger him. I see. Reality hit Fudge like a lead pipe. Rescind the order to arrest Mr. Black. List him as a special advisor to the Department of Law Enforcement with all the powers and privileges that position entails, and find a way to give him my assurance that it was all a misunderstanding. Good idea. Shacklebolt nodded. I'll get right on it. And send a full report to Madam Bones. Self-preservation was one of the few things that Fudge excelled at. With the order that she provide any assistance that Mr. Black requires that will not impede the war effort. Fudge waited until the Auror left the room before reaching into his desk to pull out the bottle he kept for occasions like this. Trembling hands poured a glass, and Fudge contemplated his recent brush with death. Shacklebolt left the minister's office and made his way back to the Department of Law Enforcement. After writing up a quick report on the day's events for his superior, he went in search of his partner. What's the verdict? Tonks asked nervously. I managed to convince the minister that further pursuit of Mr. Black would be a bad idea, Kingsley replied. He's also given the official okay to tell Bones what happened. Are we going to do that now? Tonks was still a bit stiff from her injuries. I've already forwarded it to Bones. Shacklebolt took a deep breath. I think we should knock off early and go get a drink. Sounds good, Tonks agreed. But I'm not supposed to mix alcohol with the potions they gave me. Then you can have juice, Kingsley smiled. Come on. Right, Tonks nodded. The two Aurors left the ministry building and made their way to a secure floor. You up for this? Kingsley gave his partner a worried look. I'm not sure about traveling with a head injury. So I'll throw up when I get there, Tonks shrugged. I'll be fine. Okay. Kingsley threw in a handful of flow and motioned for his partner to go first. Hags before beauty. Ladies first, Tonks corrected and called out her destination. Taking one last glance around, Kingsley tossed in his own handful of flu and called out his destination. Now that the two of you have arrived, Dumbledore gave a grandfatherly smile. We can get to business. We have some important information, Kingsley called out as he took his seat. You won't believe what the minister did, Tonks chipped in. Enlighten us then, Snape sneered. The minister sent us to arrest Mr. Black, Shacklebolt smiled. Under the leadership of his special assistant. I take it that your mission was not a success? Dumbledore asked mildly. Black dropped a rock slide on us. Tonks gave a weak smile. Most of the injuries were nothing that couldn't be healed by a few hours with a healer. I see, Dumbledore nodded. Were there any fatalities? One, Kingsley nodded. Dolores Umbridge was crushed under a rock and bled to death before I could put a clotting charm on her. I see, Dumbledore nodded. You're sure that this was the work of Mr. Black and not an accident? The Egyptians gave me a message from Mr. Black. Shacklebolt licked his lips. He said that he understood that we were just doing our jobs, and he said that Tonks and I were very good Aurors. He said that if we kept trying to arrest him, that he would get annoyed. He also said that he didn't like Umbridge, and that he wasn't saddened by her death in such a terrible accident. No one got seriously hurt except for Umbridge? Moody asked, What else can you tell me about what happened? I talked to one of the men that dug us out, Kingsley replied. He told me that Mr. Black was standing next to him when the rock slide occurred. He added that the only reason they bothered to check is because Mr. Black mentioned that there might have been someone caught up in the rock slide, and how it would be terrible if nobody checked. Didn't want you dead then, Moody nodded. Wanted Umbridge dead and she died. Wanted you alive, and went so far as to send men to rescue you. You don't believe that there's any chance it could have been an accident? Dumbledore asked quietly. The chances of a team of Aurors after the man to get caught in a freak accident are fairly low, Moody nodded. For the only fatality to be a ministry flunky that Mr. Black doesn't like makes the chances even lower. For all the injuries on the Aurors that Mr. Black does like to be minor lowers the odds even more. And for Mr. Black to send a group of men to dig out the team makes the odds too low to consider. Mr. Black also instructed the Egyptian government to give us the best of care, Kingsley added. He also insisted on paying for it. They told me that the only reason we were going home instead of a small cell was because Mr. Black asked them to let us go. Tonks swallowed. And one of the nurses told me that they believed that Mr. Black was an ex-Dark Lord. Really? Dumbledore leaned forward in interest. She said that it was just a rumor. Tonks bit her lower lip. But that they believed that Mr. Black destroyed several civilizations, and that the fact that he spent his time foiling Dark Lords was either a hobby or his idea of redemption. One of the orderlies told me that Mr. Black showed them several previously unknown tombs and a valley of lost magical knowledge. Kingsley added, he also mentioned that several of the tombs reported that their owners fell to the Dark One, and it was strongly suggested that the Dark One was Mr. Black. I see. Dumbledore paused to take in the information. Learn all you can about this man, but do not antagonize him. No wonder. He has so much contempt for Voldemort. Moody gave a rasping laugh. Black destroyed entire civilizations, and Vold has trouble subjugating a small subgroup in a single country. Could I ask you something? Harry looked down at his new friend. What would you like to know? The architect nodded. When we were at the Great Pyramid, I noticed something odd. Yes. I'd always thought that it would be crowded with visitors, Harry replied. But when we were there, it was deserted. Ah, the goblin nodded. That's because I was using tourist repellent. It allows me to work in peace. Oh, Harry nodded. Well, I guess that explains that. And no more thought need be wasted on the matter. The architect nodded in agreement. Master. Random Death Eater number 3 approached his master. I have news for you. What is it? The Dark Lord leaned back in his chair. The group in Egypt reports that they have information that suggests that Mr. Black was the most feared Dark Lord in history, the Death Eater groveled. They say that entire civilizations crumbled before his might.
What?
Voldemort grabbed his wand. How dare you say that he could have been more terrible than I am?
Crucio.
28. Boy, did you pick the wrong guy to kidnap. Harry and his group returned to the Zeppelin to find a worried doctor clutching a piece of parchment. What's wrong? Harry asked in concern. They've kidnapped the professor. The doctor handed over the parchment. They're demanding that you give yourself up. How did they manage to send the ransom note? Harry blinked. There's another not explaining that, the doctor replied. Here. The professor writes that he sent it back with his Zippo and then sent this second note explaining how the first note got here along with an explanation on how this second not arrived. Hench Girl glanced through the note. Though he doesn't say why he didn't just use the Zippo to port back. He was probably out of range or something, Harry shrugged. What's the other note say? Says that they'll start cutting off fingers if you don't respond soon. Hench Girl looked over the parchment. Is it difficult to reattach fingers? Very, the doctor nodded. If they send us a finger, it might be too late to put it back on by the time we find him. Can you attach a fresh finger if I was to find another one? Harry asked quietly. Yes, the doctor nodded. But I don't think you'll have an easy time finding any fresh fingers. If we find the people who took him, Harry's smile turned cold. I'll have all the body parts you'll ever need. The doctor nodded. I'll move the Zeppelin to the professor's location, Hench Girl replied. He shouldn't be too hard to find. I'm going to do a bit of reading, Harry called out. Tell me when we're close. I want to be sure we have a good entrance. I'll get a field hospital set up, the doctor volunteered. I'll get some sleep. The architect nodded to himself. Wake me if there are any interesting ruins or something. No one's going to save any of you, the bandit smirked at his captives. And pretty soon I'm going to start sending parts of you back to your families and… Oh, shut up, the professor glared. It's bad enough being in such an uncomfortable cage. Must you taint the air with your incessant simpering?
Wah.
The bandit stared in shock. He'd never had that response. And another thing, the professor started working up steam. I think I'm an important captive. I should have my own cage. Why should I have to share a cage with other people? Granted, they've been good company, but still I find it rather insulting that you didn't go to the effort of giving me my own cage or even chaining me to the bars. That lack of respect for my level of threat will not go forgotten. Oh, huh? The bandit wandered off in confusion. Tormenting the captives was no fun if they were going to complain about how mild the treatment had been. You stood up to him. One of the captives stared at the professor in shock. I've never seen anybody do that. The nerve of that man. The professor folded his arms. You'd think that I was harmless. I can't believe how insulting that is. Who are you? One of the other captives asked with a look of wonder. Me? The professor smiled. I'm no one of consequence. The dread Pirate Roberts? The captive smiled. Yea, 3 cheers for. I'm not the dread Pirate Roberts. The professor frowned. I'm Mr. Black. The captives all perked up. With Mr. Black around, they'd soon be out. Nope. The professor shook his head. He usually adds that he's just a guy on vacation. I'm the professor. Who? The captive sagged. The professor. I work for Mr. Black. The professor looked around at the blank faces. Surely you've heard of me? Wait. One of the captives gave a slow nod. He's the guy that works with Hench Girl. You know Hench Girls? The captives perked up. What's she like? That's not important. The professor sulked. What's important is that Mr. Black will be here soon, and I think that he'll be annoyed. So if you'll give me that hairpin, that bubble gum, those bits of wood, and that green rock, I'll find a way to get the cage open so Mr. Black doesn't have to wait around while the others overcome the wards. We're close, Hench Girl called out. Excellent, Harry grinned. I thought that I'd better provide a better entrance than fog. What are you going to do? Hench Girl asked with a frown. Fog is uncommon in the desert, Harry explained as he began casting the spells. Sandstorms, on the other hand, the book has a section on sandstorms? Hench Girl's brows shot up. I must have missed it. No, Harry shook his head. But it does have a section on wind. Wind's picking up, Bandit 1 said to Bandit 2. Yep, Bandit 2 nodded. Looks like there might be a storm. And you know what happens in storms, Bandit 1 grinned. Things go missing. The big crate that the boss has been keeping everyone away from, Bandit 2 suggested. Gotta be worth a lot, Bandit 1 agreed. Why don't we open it up and check? Be a shame if someone beat us to it. Bandit 2 grabbed his crowbar. The 2 idiots pried open the crate and found a large metal box inside. How do you suppose we open this? Bandit 1 frowned. The key is hanging off it, Bandit 2 smirked. Lucky for us. Well, let's open it then. Bandit 1 grabbed the key and opened the lock. Just a statue. Of what? Bandit 2 peered into the darkness. Looks like a sleeping Nundu. Bandit 1 gave his opinion. It was then that the statue's eyes shot open. I don't think that's a statue. Bandit 2 gave his opinion. It was the last thing he'd ever do. The Nundu raged through the camp, killing everyone that crossed its path. Within minutes, nearly every bandit in camp had been ripped to bloody shreds. What's going on out there? Wormtail growled. Sounds like Mr. Black might be here, one of the younger Death Eaters opinioned. Why don't you go check? Why don't you? Wormtail replied. Because I already have my wand out, rat, the young Death Eater smirked. Fine, Wormtail glared and stepped out of the tent. Everything seemed oddly calm, and Wormtail was about to turn around and step back into the tent he shared with the other Death Eaters when he felt a hot breath on the back of his neck. Turning to look, Wormtail began screaming when his mind registered what he saw. Wormtail screamed as the large cat-like creature clamped down on his arm. Turning into a rat, the pathetic man managed to escape and ran towards the tent. What did you find? The Death Eaters looked up as their comrades staggered into the tent and returned to human form. Where's the port keys? Peter demanded. Where's the bloody port key? I got it right here around my neck. One of the Death Eaters pulled it out. So don't worry. Peter lunged at the man and grabbed it. Activate it.
What?
Activate the damn thing now. Peter looked over his shoulder and nearly passed out in fright when he saw the Nundu stick its head in the tent. Merlin, the snide Death Eater from before, paled. It can't be. The Death Eater managed to activate the port key just as the terrible beast opened its mouth. Of the entire team of Death Eaters, they would be the only survivors. Professor, Harry found the cage containing his friend. Stand back while I get this open. No need. The professor held up a strange-looking device. If you could stand to one side. Sure. Harry stepped aside and watched in shock as the cage collapsed into its component parts. Do you want to find your wand now? Again, no need. The professor shrugged. I left it on the Zeppelin. Is there anything you'd like to do here? No. Harry shook his head. Everyone gather around. We've got to get away from here as soon as possible. Why is that? The professor blinked. Someone let a Nundu loose in the camp, and it's been rampaging and killing everyone, Harry replied. What an amazing coincidence, one of the captives smirked. You wouldn't happen to be Mr. Black, would you? I am, Harry nodded. Why? No reason. The man looked like he was barely holding back the laughter. Just wondering. The rest of the group of former captives got a look of dawning realization and began snickering and concealing grins. Everyone touching the port key? Harry took one last look around. Port me up? You found him. Hench Girl greeted the arrivals.
Yay.
And he was with a bunch of other prisoners, Harry nodded. So it might be a good idea to send them to the doctor. It also might be a good idea to notify the authorities about the rampaging Nundu that I saw in the camp. Sir, one of the former captives walked into the Egyptian Department of Magical Law Enforcement. I have information that you have to hear. Khafra? The head of Magical Law Enforcement looked at the man in shock. You're alive. Mr. Black rescued me from the bandits. Khafra gave a weak smile. And I believe that he killed every bandit there. My God, he told us that he destroyed the camp, but he did not say that he did it alone. The older man shook his head in wonder. How did he do it? One of two ways, Khafra smiled. Either he set a Nundu loose in the camp or he's a Nundu animagus, Khafra replied. He told us that there is a Nundu on the loose, but we couldn't find any sign of the creature when we looked. The old man smiled. Though it would make sense for the most dangerous man in the world to take the form of the most dangerous creature in the world, don't you think? Mr. Black, ex-Dark Lord, or the incarnation of death and destruction. By misinformation. It has come to our attention that Mr. Black has admitted to being the cause of the destruction of several civilizations, and this has led some to label him as an ex-Dark Lord. We at the Quibbler would like to propose an alternate explanation. For starters, there can be no creation without destruction, and Mr. Black has shown time and time again that he is quite good at destroying things. Mr. Black, he can't be human. By Laodice Lovegood. I recently had the privilege of visiting a small town in Bulgaria, where I came upon a statue dedicated to Mr. Black, who is a local folk hero that many people think is a patron of fertility. A whole conclave of Vila. Now I'm sure most men have dreamed about doing it, but can you imagine what it would take to actually? And all the Vila were worn out. Could barley move? Several Vila conclaves have posted rewards for the location of Mr. Black, said one of the Vila. I talked to my cousins and they told me all about him. They said that. The question remains, how do we convince Mr. Black to teach us his secrets? Hopefully coming soon from Lovegood Press, What I Did to an Entire Conclave of Vila and How I Did It by Mr. Black. I think I can find out, Father. Luna looked up from her father's latest article. Find out what kumquats. The odd man looked down at his child. What Mr. Black did to all those Vila, and more importantly how, Luna replied. How's this sound? I'm Luna Lovegood. Lovegood by name, love very good by reputation. Go to your room, Laodice replied calmly. And don't come out until after I have a chance to perform all those chastity rituals. I'm sure I could get him to join me there, Luna replied as she skipped up the stairs. The house has wards, her father replied. I'm sure he could get through those, Luna smirked. Well then go to my room while I impersonate you with Polygus, Laodice nodded. It was a foolproof plan. No, Luna stuck out her tongue. You go to your room while I do whatever I want. Fine. Fine. 29. Off we go to India. Harry spent the morning going over the various magical texts that had been recovered from his finds. Most of them were nothing spectacular, but one did catch his eye. It was a journal from one of the tombs that dated to the late Roman period. The journal's first pages labeled it as being a copy of an older document. Bit of a whiny bastard, Harry glanced through the first three pages. Full of himself, too. About halfway through the book, he came across something that caught his eye. Putting down the book, Harry made his way to the bridge to meet up with Hench Girl and the professor. Hey, Professor. Harry walked into the room and looked around. Who are all these people? You of course know Director Asim. The professor smiled. This is Mr. Jones. He's a representative from Gringotts Bank. Nice to meet you. Harry nodded to the man. Is there some reason you chose to visit? We were hoping that you would be willing to subcontract the treasure recovery, Jones smiled. That would allow you to move on, and the treasure to be recovered much quicker. Oh, Harry nodded. How much do you want? We were thinking that half of your share would be a fair price, Jones suggested. Oh, Harry nodded. No.
What?
Jones had never been in a negotiation like this. No. Harry smiled. But thanks for the offer. What did you come in here for? Hench Girl asked with a smile. Oh, Harry nodded. I almost forgot. I just wanted to tell you that I wanted to make a quick stop in Atlantis when we got around to crossing the Atlantic Ocean. What? Screamed nearly every person in the room. Just that I wanted to make a quick stop in Atlantis, Harry replied. There's something I'd like to pick up. You know where Atlantis is? Jones asked incredulously. People have been searching for the lost city's resting place for years. Yep, Harry nodded. They wouldn't have found it. It's under a charm that prevents you from finding it unless you know the location, and the sinking didn't harm the enchantments. You mentioned that you wanted to pick something up? Asim asked, wanting to get the conversation back on track. Yeah, Harry nodded. Some guy named Murden hid a book that he said contained great power just before he got kicked out, and I'd like to see what's in it. Murden's? Asim asked in shock. Kicked out? Yeah, Harry nodded. He said that they kicked him out because they were jealous of his great power, and the official reason was because he was too magically weak, but I think it was because he was a whiny bastard, and they just got sick of him. What else can you tell us about Murden's? Jones demanded. Well, Harry paused to think for a moment. He had bad acne, red hair, and his voice didn't change until he was 15. Harry shook his head. God, was that diary tedious. Can't tell you anything about what he was like after his 17th birthday, though. Oh, the men shared a glance. Well, Harry yawned. I'm going to go take a nap. The professor and Hench Girl watched in amusement as the men sat frozen in shock. Mummy's brew. Asim pulled a flask out of his pocket and offered it to Jones. I have a very important report to make. Asim barged into a meeting between his superiors. I have vital information that you must hear. What is it, Asim? One of them asked. This had better be important, another added. Mr. Black knows the location of Atlantis, Asim shouted. And he's planning on visiting it to recover something left behind by Merlin himself.
What?
The collected group's jaws dropped in shock. What did he say? One of the members managed to recover from their shock. He said that the lost city was covered by a ward that would only let those possessing the password to cross. Asim answered quickly. He added that he didn't think much of Merlin. Why not? He said that Merlin was a whiny kid with acne. Asim gulped. And that his voice didn't change until late in life. He said that he couldn't tell us much about Merlin's life after the age of 17. Oh, they shared glances. Just goes to show how old he really is. One of the older men spoke up. Asim, I've known you all your life, but do you know what I think of when I think of you?
No.
I think of the snot-nosed kid who threw a rock through my sitting room window, the old man replied. Knobby knees and runny nose. Not of the man you are now. Mr. Black, the professor knocked on Harry's door. Remember that Nundu you saw in the camp? Yeah, Harry nodded. Why, well, the professor smiled. Do you also remember that device I made to get myself out of that cage? Why do I have a feeling that I'm not going to like the way this conversation is headed? Harry sighed. What happened? It's funny you should ask that, the professor giggled. Because that invention of mine just happened to have transported the Nundu to one of the unused sections of the Zeppelin.
What?
Harry's eyes widened in alarm. Don't worry, the professor waved off the concerns. It's in a section of space outside of normal space. One of my experiments went a little wrong, and, well, I guess it doesn't matter. The important thing is that you figure out what to do with the Nundu. Why me? Harry blinked. It's your Nundu. Well, the professor took a moment to think about it. No, it's your Nundu. I had it registered as your pet. When did you do that? Harry smirked. Just now, the professor nodded. When I said it was your pet. So, you didn't file any paperwork with any government or anything? Harry asked sarcastically. You just decided that it was mine? That's it exactly, the professor nodded. Why can't I just say it's your Nundu? Harry tried to twist his mind around his friend's logic. Because it already belongs to you, the professor nodded. And switching owners would hurt its feelings, so you can't give it to me? Oh, Harry sighed. I see. Do we have a way to feed it? I've taken care of it, the professor nodded. But Hench Girl and I were talking, and we think that you should take a more active role in its care and feeding. By Hench Girl, and you mean just you, right? Harry nodded. And I'm guessing that by more active role you mean all of it, don't you? Well, yes, the professor admitted with a frown. Nice try, Harry smirked. But no. Fine, the professor sulked. Go talk to the doctor, Harry suggested. And Hench Girl, I'm sure that the doctor might be able to use the fact that it breathes out diseases, and who knows, Nundu droppings might be valuable potions ingredients. And getting Hench Girl to check if Nundu droppings are potions ingredients would be a perfect way to trick her into cleaning up after it, the professor nodded. Brilliant. That wasn't. So where do you think we should go next? Harry figured that it would be best if he avoided that particular conversation. I don't have any preferences, the professor shrugged. Where would you like to go? India sounds nice, Harry shrugged. And I've done a bit of reading on Bhutan. Sounds like an interesting place to visit. Then we shall go to India, the professor nodded. There are a few things that Hench Girl and I wanted to look at in India. What do you two want to look at in India? Harry glanced up at the professors and noticed the odd look in the other man's eye. Never mind. There are some things that I'd prefer not to know. Very well, the professor nodded. I shall set a course. I guess I'll read through some of these texts we got, Harry shrugged. Interesting stuff. I've learned more about wards and curses in the last few hours than I have in the past few years. Mr. Black. The doctor knocked on the door. Is this a good time? Sure, Harry nodded. What do you need? I'll just be going then. The professor took his leave. I was hoping to get that blood sample, the doctor replied. And I wanted to cast a few diagnostic charms. Okay, Harry nodded. Go ahead. The doctor pulled out a small syringe and filled it with Harry's blood. Is that going to be safe? Harry winced. My blood is supposed to be poisonous. It should be, the doctor nodded. I cast every protection charm I could find on it, and then had the professor and Hench Girl add their charms, and the architect thought it looked fun, so he used a bit of goblin magic, and then… I get it, Harry nodded. Need anything else? I'll tell you after I cast the diagnostic charms, the doctor replied. Looks like you have a piece of basilisk fang embedded in one of your bones. I got bit by one a few years ago, Harry nodded. And I was lucky enough to have a phoenix around to cry in the wound. That would explain what I'm seeing, the doctor nodded. I'd also like a saliva sample. I want to see if you can turn people into werewolves. All right, Harry opened his mouth to allow access. 1 second. Okay, you can close now. Thanks, Harry nodded. Did you find anything else? Lots of things, the doctor nodded. If you're asking, did I understand most of it, then the answer is no. I'll get back to you on that. Ask the professor to tell you about the Nundu. Harry scratched the back of his head. I was thinking that you might have a use for its breath. I might, the doctor nodded. One would reason that if it has the diseases, then it also might have the cure for them. Thank you. No problem, Harry smiled. Harry passed the time on the trip to India by going over the immense amount of material that had been recovered from the tombs, and by the time they arrived, he figured that he must have doubled his knowledge of offensive wards. We have arrived, my friend. The professor knocked on Harry's door. And I have some devices that I think might interest you. Oh. Harry got up. What kind of devices? This, the professor held up a small roll of leather, is a set of lockpicks. It should be able to open virtually any lock in the world. What about magic locks? Harry examined the item. I included a small device that should trick most magical locks into believing that you have the correct passcode, the professor replied proudly. It's all in this set of instructions. Thanks, Harry nodded. What else? This belt, the professor handed over a dragon hide belt, has several hidden compartments containing an assortment of potions. Hench Girl and the doctor's idea. Thanks, Harry nodded. It's a great idea. Another thing that the doctor asked me to develop is this little thing. The professor pulled out a small metal plate. It goes on your arm over the chip of basilisk fang. The way this works is that it surrounds the chip with a magical field and collects the poison that's being produced. A few days, and your blood won't be so deadly. Why does it collect the poison? Harry affixed the item onto his arm, and is there a way to turn it off? Hench Girl and the doctor tell me that basilisk poison is much too useful to be floating around in your blood, the professor explained. So they want it collected. To turn off the effect, just will it off. Will it off. Decide you want it to stop working? The professor explained. 2 more items. Where are they? Harry smiled. They're in my lab, the professor explained. Come get them when you finish packing. Okay, Harry shrugged. Harry spent the next few minutes packing and then shouldered his pack and went to the professor's lab. What have you got for me, Professor? Harry strolled into the lab with a look of anticipation. I have 2 very important items that I would like you to try out. The professor was bouncing with anticipation. Here's the first one. What do you think? I think it looks like a camera. Harry lifted the device to take a closer look. What does it do? It is a disguised audio recording device. The professor replied happily, and here's the other device. It looks like a tape recorder, Harry replied in a flat voice, but I would guess that it's a camera of some sort, isn't it? Yes, you're right. It's a sophisticated imagery device. The professor agreed. 30. The universe's spittoon. Hellos. Amelia Bones knocked on the door of one of the Wizarding World's more eccentric families. Is there anybody here? You. Laetus snarled as he opened the door. My office now. What? Amelia had been warned. Oh, why didn't she believe them? SIT. Laetus's face reddened. Do you know how deep the department is because of you? No.
No.
Laetus tossed a large file on the desk. In the past month, you've destroyed 5 cars and cost the city over $50 million. Oh, Amelia blinked. Yes-o, Laetus sighed. The mayor is on the chief's ass, and the chief is on my ass. I would have had you gone a long time ago if it weren't for the fact that you're such a good cop. Thanks. She blinked. Can I talk with you about the big heroin bust? Laetus nodded. Good job. Just leave one of them alive next time. Damn reporters are saying all kinds of things about you. Reporters? Pox on all of them, Laetus nodded. You won't find a more useless or dishonest profession. Show me a reporter, and I'll show you someone that's too dumb and dishonest to make it in the real world. Okay, she blinked. I was hoping to ask you. Father. Luna stormed into the room and began glaring. You took your medicine again, didn't you? I want your badge and gun Lovegood, Laetus scowled. There's no place on the force for a loose cannon like you. What you did to the suspects in the Morales investigation, well, let's just say that you belong behind bars as much as any of them. Vomitus Maximus. Luna flicked her wand. You can open your mouth without vomiting after you start acting normal again. A 3-meter stream of vomit shot out of the man's mouth and out a conveniently nearby window. Bones watched the byplay with a sense of shocked horror. Excuse me? Hello, Director Bones. Luna smiled. I'm ever so sorry about the way Father's been acting. You mentioned something about medication? Bones tried to make sense of the situation. Yes, he gets like this sometimes, Luna nodded. I've tried to lock the pills away, but Father always manages to find them. I see. The director did not see. I don't know why he started to think that we're police officers, Luna shrugged. Everybody knows that we're secret agents posing as reporters that are posing as a man and his daughter. Yes, well, right. I was hoping to go through any information you might have on Mr. Black. The director told herself that she could do this. She needed that information, and these two seemed to have more of it than anyone else. Okay, Luna shrugged. Do you want to set up a payment plan or pay in a lump sum?
What?
Secret agent work is tough, and it doesn't pay well, Luna explained in a whisper.
Oh.
I see. Amelia nodded. How about I set up an account, and we pay you for any information you get as you get it? Okay. Luna focused on a point 3 meters to her left and 15 meters behind the director's head. Well, Amelia smiled nervously. About that information. Blarg. Laetus opened his mouth. Ready to be a reporter again, Father? Luna smirked. Blarg. Laetus nodded. Okay then. Luna undid the spell. I hope you learned your blarg. Don't forget that I'm the one that taught you that spell. Laetus's grin was entirely too smug. And I can blarg. Blarg. Luna glared. But you don't know how to undo it, and I do. Blarg. I feel sorry for whatever is below that window. Amelia muttered to herself. Now, let's agree not to do this until the next Projectile Vomit Appreciation Day. Luna nodded as she undid the spell on her father again. Projectile Vomit Appreciation Day? Amelia knew that she was going to regret asking about it. Yes, Laetus nodded. I've noticed that several Muggle institutes of higher learning hold festivals where several of the students projectile vomit. Fascinating custom those Muggles have. About that information? Here you go. Luna tossed over a large file. Pay us when you have a chance. So long as that chance is soon, Laetus added. I've got a ravenous hell beast to feed and keep from the rest of humanity. Father, Luna blinked. You say the nicest things about me. I'll just be going then. Bones took a quick glance through the file and was astounded at how thorough it was. Don't let the snodfish get you, Luna replied happily. I won't, Bones promised. As she made her way back to the office, a terrible thought forced its way into her brain. The file was much more detailed than was normally produced by reporters. What if the Lovegood girl hadn't been joking about being a secret agent? The two of them were the last people one would expect to be working for, someone like Mr. Black. Eyes widening in shock, Bones froze. On the one hand, she didn't have any evidence, and on the other, it explained so much. Amelia walked outside and passed a very disgruntled and vomit-covered postman. Taking a step around the corner of the house to avoid the poor postman's notice, she disappeared with a pop. The first thing she did upon her return was to pull out a piece of parchment and list a few known facts about the Lovegood family. The first was that Luna was a friend of the Potter boy and had been with him on his trip to the Department of Mysteries. The second was that she came from a family that was well known for its eccentricity, so well known that very few wizards gave them a second thought or took them the least bit seriously, well, until recently when Black appeared and proved that at least one of their crazy ideas was true, and she supposed about the rebirth of the Dark Lord. The fourth was Black. The family knew more about the mysterious man than anyone else that she knew of. Amelia frowned. Things were looking entirely too neat, and the first thing she learned as a rookie investigator was that when things fit together so nicely that she had to be missing something, nothing was perfect. On the other hand, what kind of spies would announce that they were spies? One would think that they would do more to blend in. No one would think that. She froze. No one would suspect that a person that was so flamboyant would be a spy, and the very idea that they announced their profession. Amelia destroyed her well-thought-out list with a quick security charm. On the one hand, nothing had been proven, and on the other, she was going to get a subscription to that newspaper of theirs. Only you, Professor, Harry grinned. Where are we at the moment? We're over a tropical isle, the professor smiled. Hench Girl wanted to get some time on the beach. Could you arrange a port key for me?
Harry yawned.
Of course. The professor nodded. But if I may, I'd like to suggest something. What's that? Harry blinked. It's late. The professor pointed to a large clock. Why not spend the remaining hours of daylight on the beach with us? That way you can get a fresh start in the morning. Okay, Harry nodded. That sounds like a great idea. Wonderful. The professor's grin widened. I'll just go get Hench Girl. You do that. Harry nodded as he shifted his clothing to something more appropriate to the beach. I'll meet you in the port room. Harry walked to the Portran's room and was soon joined by an excited professor and Hench Girl. I'm so happy you decided to join us. Hench Girl was a bit more bubbly than normal. And to protect our skin from the sun and salt, I developed this new potion. Cool. Harry blinked. Sounds great. Everyone drink up. Hench Girl passed the bottles around. I tried to make this batch taste like strawberries. Mine tastes like old socks, the professor gagged. So it did. Hench Girl took the bottle back. I guess I must still be mad about the fact that you chose to get kidnapped and disrupted my vacation in Egypt. Silence, Devil Woman, the professor scowled. Devil Womans? Hench Girl's eyes flashed. Look who's talking, you little troll. Troll? Troll. I think it might be time to go to the beach now, Harry suggested. Okay. Hench Girl nodded. Sounds good. The professor agreed. The three friends ported down and found themselves in a secluded cove. This is great. Harry looked around. Absolutely fantastic. The whole stretch of land belongs to a wizarding family, so we won't be disturbed by anyone. The professor smiled. Not even the family. Not even the families? Harry had a bad feeling about the answer. They live in England, Hench Girl yawned. I know one of them, and they said that we could spend as much time as we wanted here. Oh, Harry relaxed. He really needed to learn not to doubt his friends. Hench Girl spread out a blanket, and the three of them flopped down onto it. This is the life. Harry closed his eyes. I need to spend more time on the beach. I agree, the professor nodded. I think that, what's that in your hand? This. Harry opened his hand to show the rock that he was about to throw into the surf. Just a rock. Could you let me examine it? The professor held out his hand. Sure, Harry shrugged. Knock yourself out. What is it, Professor? Hench Girl leaned forward. It appears to have a high concentration of titanium, the professor replied. I've read that the beaches around here have rich titanium deposits, but I've never seen anything like this. Pity we can't go into the ocean and find the source, Harry yawned. I think I saw something about the stuff on the telly. We might be able to do something, the professor smiled. I'll have a talk with the architect about it later, which brings us to a subject that Hench Girl and I have been wanting to discuss with you. Go ahead, Harry nodded. I'm all ears. Hench Girl and I found the perfect island for sale, the professor smiled. Barren, desolate, covered with numerous enchantments that repel nearly anything that has anything to do with people. Large enough to build a very large fortress, but small enough to be easy defensible. Hench Girl added, it's also unclaimed land, so we won't be bothered by any of those silly regulations preventing us from breaking the laws of nature or finding out things that mankind was not meant to know. And the best part is that it's near the Antarctica, so there will always be plenty of delicious penguins to eat. The professor finished with an excited smile. Penguins? Harry forced himself not to ask, so why are you telling me all of this? Well, the professor began. We were kind of hoping that you would be willing to buy it. Why not buy it yourself? Harry asked, raising his eyebrow. We're not very good with money, Hench Girl explained with an embarrassed expression. So we gave you controlling interest in the company and only allowed ourselves a small percentage of the profits to fund our research. Oh, Harry was stunned. Sure, we could buy it if you want. Great. Hench Girl clapped. I'll tell the architect to start designing the place. What's the name of this company? Harry couldn't believe how much his life had changed in the short time since he'd left school. Black Ink, the professor replied proudly. Black Incorporated? Harry nodded. No. Hench Girl shook her head. Black Ink, the professor can't spell. Why not Professor Industries or Hench Girl Incorporated? Harry was having a hard time following the train of logic. Why name it after me? Hench Girl Incorporated? Hench Girl rubbed her chin. Can that be the name for our potions department? Whatever you want, Harry shrugged. We named it after you for many reasons, the professor smiled. For one thing, none of this would have happened without your help. Okay, Harry stretched out. Thank you. You are very welcome, the professor nodded. Yeah, Hench Girl smiled. I had another idea for you too. Harry rested his head in his hands. I understand that the Zippos are too small to send large things through, but... The professor couldn't wait to hear his friend's idea. But couldn't we use it with the port trans? Harry smiled. That way we can automatically port key to anyone with a Zippo. Wouldn't work. The professor deflated. We might be able to work something out with manually created port keys, but we don't have the technology to carry out your idea at the moment. Most we could do is send small non-living objects. How small? Harry smiled when he saw the professor indicate the size of the item with his hands. Why don't we use it to deliver things? We'd be the fastest mail order business in the world. You item in 30 seconds, or it's free. We might be able to do something like that. Hench Girl nodded. I don't like the idea of giving out free items, though. Then skip that part, Harry shrugged. In fact, make them pay extra for our instant delivery. Okay, Hench Girl nodded. Now let's go swimming. Last one in is a jar of some sort of disgusting matter, the professor called out. Possibly something that smells strongly of sulfur. The next day, Harry's portkey delivered him to a busy street in a rather large town. There you are. A man stepped out of one of the many shops and grabbed Harry by the arm. You were supposed to be here last night. Do you know how hard it will be to get everything back on schedules? Huh? Harry stared at the obviously crazy man. Here are your portkeys. The man handed over a couple of small metal rings. And here are your souvenirs. A bronze statue of Callie and an old chakram that I'm sure has all sorts of mysterious powers. Actually, I'd bet that both of them have some odd and unusual powers. What's going on? Harry grabbed the items with his left hand to free his right for the duel that seemed to be on the way. You're late, that's what's going on. The man glared. You didn't do any of the things I saw you doing last night. What happened? I went to the beach. Harry let his wand drop into his hand. And you still didn't answer my question. If you want answers, then talk to that cousin of mine in England, 'cause all of this is his fault. The man looked down at a small scrap of paper. I contacted the tailor that you were supposed to go to. He and his wife will contact your friends. What am I forgetting? Harry's eyes widened as he felt the portkey pulling him to his next destination. Oh, right. The man slapped himself on the forehead. The Death Eaters. Suppose that they won't be showing up. Not with how late he was anyway. Some people just don't consider other people's feelings. Harry dropped into a crouch with his wand out and quickly surveyed his surroundings. To his front was the Taj Mahal, and to his back and sides were tourists. Shrugging his shoulders, Harry ignored the odd looks and pocketed his wand. Sighing in frustration, Harry walked up to the massive white building and added the shopkeeper to his people to beat severely list. Harry spent several hours marveling at the massive building and was examining an interesting stretch of wall when he felt the tug of the other portkey. Forgot about the second one. Harry's wand appeared in his hand, and his eyes scanned for danger. Are you my guest? A small man looked up with a bored expression. Maybe. Harry started to relax. I'm not sure. Where are we? You're my guest, the small man nodded. We're in a place where nations don't matter and names have no meaning. What's that supposed to? Wow. Harry stared in awe at the massive mountains that dominated the skyline. We must be in the Himalayas. Perhaps, the small man shrugged. I'm not one to worry at such things. I'm your guide for this trip. I'm Mr. Black. Harry's mind had yet processed all of the amazing view. Nice to meet you. Come with me, the guide smiled. It would be nice to get there before it gets dark. Get where? Harry trailed behind the small man. To where we're going, the guide replied with a grin. Where else would we be headed? I guess that makes sense, sort of. Harry's eyes crossed. How long will it take to get there? As long as it takes, the guide shrugged. That shopkeeper is definitely moving up on that list, Harry muttered to himself. The guide took Harry up an amazingly steep road and through a series of twists and turns. It is just around this bend, the guide called out as he rounded a large outcropping. What's just around the... Wow. Harry stared in awe at the large city at the end of the road. I can go no further, the guide smiled. You must take the last steps on your own. Why? I owe someone money, the guide smiled. And I'm afraid that they might be in there. Oh, Harry blinked. I'll just be going then. I shall wait here for you, the guide smiled. Have a pleasant visit. The gates swung open on their own accord and several men in red and gold robes came out. Welcome, young friend, to Shangri-La. They smiled in welcome. May your visit be pleasant. Harry walked through the gates and relaxed. The whole area seemed to exclude a sense of peace and tranquility. I think that I'm going to like this place, Harry smiled. I may have finally found my home. Maybe, one of the monks smiled. Or maybe you've just reached a waypoint in your journey around the wheel. Only time will tell. The days turned into weeks and the weeks to months. Harry spent untold hours learning to calm and to eventually master his mind, and mental defenses became absolute. Taking a deep breath, Harry shrugged off his red robes and again donned the clothing that he had worn when he came into this place. Leaving? One of the monks smiled at Harry's preparations. Yes, Harry nodded. I can't believe I spent so much time here. I'd better be getting back. Time is not a concern for you, the monk smiled. And you must only go back when it is your time to go back. Do not make the mistake of returning too soon. Thank you. Harry took one last look around. I'm going to miss this place. Thank you for allowing me to stay here. All are welcome here, the old monk smiled. And perhaps you may return in time. The future is yet unwritten, and who can say where your path may take you? Harry shouldered his pack and walked out the large gates. Harry shook his head in wonder upon seeing a small figure standing in the distance. I can't believe you waited this long. Harry smiled as he walked up to his guide. How did you know when I was going to come out? They always come out about 5 minutes after they go in, the guide shrugged. I'd think that they'd like to stay longer, but... Harry looked back at the blank spot of ground that had held the massive city only moments before. Why does this always happen to me? He moaned. Why can't I ever have a normal day? I don't know, the guide shrugged. Maybe you're the universe's spittoon. Probably, Harry nodded. It would certainly explain some things. Just follow this path down, and you'll get where you need to be, the guide pointed out a worn track. And have a pleasant journey. Thank you. Harry spent several minutes walking down the path and after a few twists and turns was surprised to find himself back on the beach that he had visited with the professor and Hench Girl. Didn't you just leave? The doctor blinked at Harry's sudden appearance. I think so, Harry frowned. I'm not sure though, since you're here. Yes? Could you rub this lotion on my back? Sure, Harry shrugged. It wasn't Shangri-La, but rubbing lotion on the back of a beautiful woman was nothing to sneer at. While Harry had his existential experiences, his friends were meeting to decide the form that their new home would take. I don't care if it is traditional, the professor glared at Hench Girl and the architect. The castle will not look like a giant skull. The island isn't even a volcano. How about some sort of Gothic monstrosities? The architect suggested, filled with secret passages and such. It's also traditional, Hench Girl mused. A bit older tradition, but still. I can live with that, the professor nodded. Let's get started on our respective parts. Well, the Dark Lord leaned forward. Nothing happened, Master. The nervous Death Eater was shaking. We showed up and nothing happened.
What?
The team got ready and we all took our positions. Tears fell under the Death Eater's mask and his voice became shrill. Nothing happened. Wormtail ate some bad shrimp and had to get his stomach pumped. Then he was hit by one of those street taxis, and then he ate some bad curry and is currently making my lord's water closet smell like a week-old corpse. Other than that, nothing happened. If nothing happened, the Dark Lord asked in false calm. Then why did half the team burst into tears when they got back? Why did the other half wet themselves? And why won't you stop shaking? He's just trying to trick us. The Death Eater giggled insanely. Trying to get us to drop our guard, but we're too smart for that. Crucio, Voldemort had to resist the urge to cry. You just couldn't get good minions anymore. Thank you for joining us for part 3 of Make a Wish by Rorschach's Blot. As Harry continues to grapple with the effects of his wish, the lines between what's possible and what's dangerous are becoming blurrier by the second. How much more will Harry have to sacrifice to get what he wants? And at what point does the cost become too high? Before we go, here are a couple of magical tidbits to leave you with. In ancient magical lore, it's said that wishes, when made under certain conditions, can twist the very fabric of reality. This is why many magical cultures have rituals in place to protect against granting such desires. Could Harry's wish be unknowingly following in those ancient footsteps? The concept of wish magic actually has roots in alchemical practices. The belief was that wishes, when tied to one's deepest desires, could manipulate both time and fate. Sounds like something Harry might have unleashed, doesn't it? We're just getting started, and part 4 is coming soon. Don't forget to hit that like button, comment below. We need at least 12 comments, and let us know how you're enjoying the twists and turns so far. Your feedback helps us keep the magic alive. Be sure to subscribe and ring the notification bell so you never miss an update. Thank you for being a part of the Grimoire Audiobooks family, and we'll see you in the next magical chapter.